my name is Dale, and my channel is Observer of Anomalous Objects. And I want to tell you how excited I am. I've got a great co-host that's going to be coming on board, and also got a special guest, Steven Bassett. I'm going to go ahead and bring my co-host on real quick. This is Rob Heatherly. And so, Rob, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your podcast and stuff that you do with Shannon, and introduce yourself for us.
I started into this field a few years ago, coming out of ancient history research. My background is structural engineering and former infantry Marine. So I was invited to lend my skills to this topic on UFOs and see what I can inject into the conversation to help figure out. And start out with Thomas Fessler on Disclosure Tonight for a little over a year, and then I moved over to Military Witnesses to UAP with my close friend Shannon Scott. And I've been doing a lot of projects, mostly in the background for the last year, because he and I both have been struggling with a lot of health issues. So that's kind of where I'm at with this, and just doing a lot of deep dive research.
Okay. Well, thank you, Rob. Appreciate it. And now we're going to bring on our special guest, Steven Bassett, the Paradigm Research Group. And so before you get started, Steve, I had a present for you that I'd like to play. It's kind of a blast from the past.
And the media at the highest end, right? The very condensed corporate media at the highest end, which somehow, either wittingly or unwittingly, is utterly complicit in maintaining this embargo. And I'm talking about the networks. I'm talking about Dan Rather, Brokaw, and Jennings. Jennings recently did a documentary with some merit. I'm talking about Koppel. I'm talking about Schultzberg. I'm talking about Kay Graham. I'm talking about the Post and the LA Times and the New York Times. They are utterly complicit in helping to maintain this embargo, because essentially there is virtually almost nothing that could happen that the paper would say, oh, that's a story. There is no person of rank, virtually. Now, high enough they would probably have to react, but overall they have stood down. And they've said it is in our best interest, for whatever reason, that we do not make this a story. And so the greatest news story of all time has sat uncovered for 57 years, while the most powerful journalists in America have done nothing about it of any consequence. And believe me, they've been approached over and over and over again in every way possible. And their basic response has always been either nothing or go away. Though they do take the information, and they are being informed.
And so, Steve, I appreciate that. Was Blast from the Past. That was from Alien Chronicles, Season 1, Episode 10. And what I loved about it, Steve, I loved your passion. Your passion just came through. You're calling out all of the big names in mainstream media, and you're convincing and convicting when you said that. Now, I'll switch to this and I'll switch back in a second. I did want to kind of introduce you a little bit from what I know. I consider you an OG, Steve. The fact that you have been at it for so long. You started what? PRG in 1996.
96.
Paradigm Research Group, is that correct?
Yeah.
And stuff. And so you have been here. You're an OG. There's no question. The only person I really know that's still active and been maybe a little bit longer is George Knapp. And so I want to have the utmost respect for you, and I want you to understand how much I appreciate you coming on this podcast. I've followed some of the stuff that you've done, the 2013 citizen hearing. And this is a separate question I have. It's not part of my other questions, but I wanted to get your perspective before you start talking about Paradigm Research Group and your new Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. I'd like to get your perspective by decades on the process of disclosure, starting in the 1990s, going into 2000s, going into 2010 and 2020, and kind of show us the evolution. And have we really made a lot of progress? It sure feels like we have, at least in the last decade. But I just kind of want your perspective on, you've been here for quite a while and you have a multiple decade perspective, and I'd love to hear it.
Okay, but first a few things. What does OG stand for? And please tell me it's not old goat.
Old guard.
Old guard.
An old guard. He's got that everybody looks up to because he's kind of been around and stuff. So OG is like an old guard. You
All right.
know, and you've
And
been
then
there, man.
secondly, look, let me tell you something. Nothing makes you feel old, because I'm staring at myself right now, but nothing makes me feel old about what I'm seeing than seeing myself from 20 some years ago and going, oh God, I actually used to look like that. I actually used to have hair. Right. And so thank you so much for that. That was
I'm
very
sorry.
nice of you. And then lastly, before we get started, I want to thank Rob for his service to his country. I always do that. I have always been a supporter of those who have protected the national security of this country and served, sometimes with great difficulty. That doesn't mean that I'm fond of the politicians that send them off to war, but that doesn't mean I don't appreciate their work. Okay, now, well, the next thing I want to say is that after I made that, by the way, what year was that? Can you remind me what year that clip was from, roughly?
Now, you said about 20 years ago. I couldn't get the exact year on it. I know it was from the Alien Chronicles, the first season, and it was episode number 10.
Okay. I was a little harsh there. I didn't at the time. I didn't have enough perspective, and my view, of course, is a little different now. If I knew then what I knew now, I would have phrased that a little differently. And here's why. In 2006, because I'm an OCD guy. I mean, that's kind of where I'm coming from. I had serious issues when I was younger, grew out of them, but OCD is part of who I am. And what I've done is I've made some lemonade out of it. All right. So sitting still and reading a 600-page book is hell, but doing a repetitive task over and over again, that's my game. And so in 2006, I started the Print Media Archive, which is on the paradigmresearchgroup.org website. And I need to promote it more, but it's under resources in the menu, and it's Print Media Archive. And what I started doing in 2006 was archiving links to mainstream professional journalism articles on the UAP issue. And I did my best to go back all the way to 47. But as you go back and get in time, the number of articles you can link online just simply becomes very few. And so it's limited. However, I'm well aware that actually there were a lot of articles printed on this issue between 47 and the early aughts, except that in order to archive those, you've got to go to archives. You've got to go to microfiche in the files or the archives of various newspapers. This is a massive task, well beyond my ability, but they're there, and historians will find them. However, on the basis of simply linked online articles that one can access, I am up to 15,000 articles, mainstream. And these 15,000 articles are triaged from twice that many or more. In other words, there's a lot of stuff on the net that's small little sites, small little publications, that just not substantive enough. And so I'm sticking with real journalism, professional journalism. And so there's a significant curation process underway. But there's far more things you can link to that is journalism of a type than just 15,000. But that's what I have linked right now. This year is the highest number of links articles than any year before. So what I've learned clearly in doing this project, because I've read all 15,000 of these articles, is this. The American journalism, which I have tremendous respect for, some of my heroes are journalists. They are the thing that keeps a democracy going. And the idea that we don't need them is ridiculous, and we don't appreciate them is a shame. Most people have no idea how many journalists die every single year trying to cover important stories. Murdered, right. They die by accidents, hit by grenades and so forth. This is going on every single year. What the journalistic community chose to do was to cover the issue. They have covered the issue. They've been writing articles about this since 1947 on. And as you move to the future, the number of articles grow and grow and grow. articles. In other words, if something happens, they cover it. They cover a conference, a book that's coming out. And so they are reporting what is happening in the public domain on this issue, and they have written thousands of articles. And if you read those, you would actually get a very comprehensive history of what has happened regarding this issue, going all the way back to 47. And of course, as we get to the future, they're really covering it. Okay, so all good, right? Yeah. My complaint back then, this guy with the hair is my complaint back then is this: what the media chose not to do, the decision they made, the deal they cut, was this. This is a democracy. We have freedom of the press. We're going to cover this issue. But we recognize that this is a high priority national security matter, kind of like our, where our nuclear submarines are at any given day, that kind of thing. And so we will not investigate it. We're not going to send out a team of reporters to see if they can get some sources in the Pentagon or meet in the basement of some garage in Roslyn and come up with some deep story and get to the bottom of what's going on, whether it's Roswell or anything else. We're not going to go Woodward and Bernstein on this. ABC, NBC, CBS, not going to do it. New York Times, Washington Post, not going to do it. And that's the decision that they made. It was a compromise. How it was made, how it was arrived, I don't know. I mean, back in the 40s and early 50s, there were 3 networks. TV was black and white, and people got their news from local papers, and the big stuff was handled by a couple of huge papers like the New York Times and the Washington Post. There weren't that many big shots to kind of get together with, have a couple of drinks, and say, this is how it should be. And so how it went down, I don't think there was any writing exchange. It was kind of an agreement, got together. Look, don't go there. Don't investigate this. This is something we have got to keep contained until the appropriate time, which if you're talking 1949, 51, 52, they couldn't have predicted a Cold War and a nuclear arms race that would still be going on 70 years later. As far as they knew, the Soviet Union might chill out and we could be partying together in a few years. They had no idea. But for the time, they wanted to definitely keep things under wraps. What happened is that understanding in which the entire journalistic complex of the United States said, we'll cover it, but we won't investigate, became institutionalized. Now, I don't want to, so it don't look like I'm just picking on the news media. There is another institution in this country that went way beyond that, right, to its utter disgrace, and we'll have to answer for it. And that is the entire academic institution of the United States, all its 5,000 colleges and universities and millions of professors that have passed through them over the 75 years, the political department, the political science departments, the physics departments, you name it, the whole damn university system, somehow or another agreed, tacitly or implicitly, that it wasn't going to touch it, right?
Not you have a reason for that?
Not going to look at the physics, not going to look at the politics. We don't want to teach it. We don't want to touch it. It doesn't exist. Leave us alone. And that's exactly what they did. There has never been a properly accredited course of study on this issue in any university or college, all 5,000, for 75 years. David Jacobs got a vanity program, taught it a little bit. I don't know if there was a credit or not. There's been a couple of courses in community colleges. That's it. The biggest news story in history, with the most profound scientific implications of all time, has been going on for 75 years, and the entire academic complex of the United States of America stood down. It is easily and by far the greatest intellectual failure in all of human history. It makes the Catholic Church's resistance to the Galilean, right, view of the solar system as being sun-centered pale in comparison. All right. And so I have a bone to pick with the university system, but not now. In terms of the journalists, let me tell you, they're coming around, and when disclosure happens, boy, they are going to go into hyperdrive. Pulitzer Prizes are going to be falling from the sky, and they are going to investigate everything. And that's great. I look forward to it. And they are our allies. So I always want to clarify that. Now, let's go back to the beginning, I think, of the modern era. I say the modern era begins in 47 with the crash at Roswell. Whatever happened prior to that was so buried that it didn't matter, whether it was something we learned about a crash in 33 in Italy or whether it was something that happened before the war. Roswell is the beginning. At that point, the United States government becomes fully aware that we're not alone. There's non-human tech from elsewhere, almost certainly another star system, and they've got dead bodies that are stinking up the entire hospital in Roswell. All right. And so from that point forward, the government's fully aware of this issue, and we are in an era of ET engagement. All right. Now, the truth embargo is institutionalized by the time of the Robertson panel in 53, and off we go, and the truth embargo reigns. The first real opportunity to end the truth embargo. I mean, there was an opportunity right after Roswell. Truman could have contacted Ramey and said, "Look, sit on this for a couple of weeks, General. We're gonna review this in Washington. We're going to go over it with the national security guys and make a decision." And he could have made a decision a couple of weeks later that the American people need to know this. It's too important not to. And he could have disclosed it. It would have been fairly straightforward, not too complicated. It would have been received very well. The public would not have gone insane. All that other crap is bullshit, always has been. And that could have happened, didn't. Okay. And so they tried to contain it for about 5 years. And then all of a sudden, the ET said, look, you're not getting the message. And so they started flying over the Capitol for about 8 days, which really made quite an impression on the White House and the DOD and everybody else. Unfortunately, nobody had iPhones back then. Cameras weren't being carried around routinely. And so as far as we know, there is no publicly available photograph of what was going on, but there have been renditions of it. And that's what you see on the internet now. But let me tell you, it was a big deal, scared the hell out of them. At that point, they could have made the decision, look, these things can go anywhere they want. They can turn up over Washington anytime they want. They may do it again next month. We can't stop them, right? We've made an effort to try to. It's hopeless, right? And so I think we need to tell the American people. And they could have done it in 53. They didn't do it. They decided, no, the nuclear thing is getting worse. By then, you had the Soviets had tested both the hydrogen and the atomic bombs, if I'm not mistaken, and like it was not looking good. And so they said, nope, got to tighten it down. Fine. So off we go. The arms race escalates all the way through to the mid-'80s. It peaks out at around 86 to 87,000 nuclear weapons stockpiled and ready for launch. About 8 countries then had the weapons at that point, and everybody is pretty much trying to decide where they're going to go after the nuclear war and how they're going to survive. Okay, fine. The next opportunity occurs when the Cold War ends, and that, of course, is 1991, and that is the period that you wanted me to pick up on. And by end, I mean, it actually ended over a period of 2 years. For some people, the end of the Cold War was the fall of the Berlin Wall. But I like to symbolically make it Christmas Day, 1991. Why Christmas Day, I have no idea. But on Christmas Day of 1991, during the H.W. Bush administration, they actually outlawed the Communist Party in the Soviet Union. All right. Wow. Outlawed it. By then, I think they were already disassembling the republics. And so it was well on the way, if it wasn't already, the Republic of Russia and not the Soviet Union, right? And I think they gave up 14 autonomous regions. And yet, still remain the largest by land mass country in the world, all right? And so it's 91. George Bush is president. The opportunity was ripe. Everyone was happy. People anticipated reduction in nuclear weapons. The Soviet Union has gone. Religion was being brought back. They were going capitalist, for Christ's sake. It looked like a win, a big win. And so the opportunity was there. And there is some evidence. It's not a lot, but we may learn more at some point that some serious consideration was underway about George H.W. Bush being the president that finally comes forward and ends this truth embargo. I hope we learn more about that. There is a powerful logic to it, because of all the presidents that could have been on board at the point that the Soviet Union dismantles, H.W. Bush was the ultimate president. He had a resume this thick, was the darling of the military intelligence complex. They named the CIA headquarters after him. He was the perfect president. In other words, from the standpoint of a president disclosing the extraterrestrial presence in a way, and then addressing it post-disclosure that is quite conducive to the interests and aspirations of the Department of Defense, he's ideal. Unfortunately, though, there was a war going on, or he was dealing with some crisis in the Middle East. He was also running an extremely high approval rating. And so it's very possible, historians will perhaps find out about this at some point, that a decision was made, yeah, H.W. Bush is the man to do this, but let's wait until his second term, right? When in his second term, the situation in the Middle East will be calmed down, and we'll have plenty of time to put this together, and George Bush will receive one of the great political legacies of all time, the disclosure president. Except, and this has happened again now, he went from being an absolute lock to win the presidency to losing it.
Yep.
And he didn't just lose it to anybody. He lost it to the anti-H.W. Bush. We went from a president who would have been beloved by the Department of Defense and the CIA to a president that was actually absolutely loathed by the Department of Defense and the CIA. They didn't want him. They didn't need him. They hated him. It was a real problem in the early months of the administration, because line officers were ridiculing the president in front of the troops and had to be sent notifications, I guess it was email, that's kind of like treason and don't do that. I mean, that's how bad it was. And so that clearly diminished the possibility of disclosure under that administration, except his history is filled with twists and turns. Lawrence Rockefeller, a progressive, big supporter of the Democratic Party, a philanthropist, an environmentalist. He is the good Rockefeller, if people want to think of it that way. They don't like the Rockefellers. He was the good Rockefeller. He was into the issue. He had supported John Mack. He had supported others in the field. He made a decision that he claims later he would have done even if George H.W. Bush had won. He would have done exactly the same thing, which could have made a big difference. He approached the administration almost immediately after Clinton took office. I think it was March 29, March 19. His lawyer sent an email to the head of the Office of Science and Technology Policy requesting an opportunity to meet with the president, Clinton, to discuss the matter of UFO files and getting those files to the American people, which was a symbolic way of ending the truth embargo. In other words, you get the files out, that ends the truth embargo. And thus began the Rockefeller Initiative. So one could say that was the first organized, significantly organized, obviously well-funded effort to get the truth embargo ended by virtue of actions from one of our branches of government, in this case, the executive branch. Unfortunately, wrong president. There was no way, no matter what Rockefeller did, that the Department of Defense was going to cooperate with President Clinton. However, the fact that the Rockefeller Initiative took place, the fact that it went on for 3 years, created an activist benefit, which is to say that the documents accounting for this effort, by accident, I think, came into the hands of Canadian researcher Grant Cameron in the year 2000, all 1,000 pages, which completely confirmed it all, which they pretty much kept under wraps. There was almost no coverage. There was one article, I think, in the Washington Post, nothing consequential, alluding to it, nothing else. And then all of a sudden, Grant Cameron had 1,000 pages confirming it all. And so now we had ourselves a pretty nice little nugget there to use to try to draw the press into the issue. And so immediately I took a copy of those documents to the USA Today and sent them to Washington Post. And I'm pretty sure they threw them immediately into the trash. Okay, so I scanned the 250 of the most important documents and put them up on my website and started sending the links to that website to journalists all over the country, right? And have been and still promoting it to this day. And so while no action was taken and the Rockefeller Initiative was still ignored for years, it was known. The effort by Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, absolutely, and John Podesta, and including even George Stephanopoulos, who after he left the administration never touched it again, even though he's been a journalist since the day he left, right? That is one story that George is simply not going to touch. I'd like to talk to him about that someday. Wasn't going to happen. The Rockefeller Initiative ends in 96. Clinton runs for president. He wins, thus being a lame duck second-term president, which absolutely, I think, petrified the Department of Defense, right? Because he was lame duck now. He had nothing to lose. He was angry as hell at the fact that they basically told him to go to hell when he tried to make efforts to, quote, bring the truth to the American people. And so, not surprisingly, all of the efforts to bring down the Clinton administration were redoubled in his second term, right? And they got him. They finally got him. They got him on Monica Lewinsky, which is true and legitimate. And they used that to really hamstring him, which they did, and force him to have to deal with an impeachment, which was not without merit, but was not able to succeed in the Senate. But it certainly nullified any chance that he might revisit that, okay? But the Clintons probably had expectations that, okay, Al Gore looks like pretty much he's going to win the next election. He's going to be the president. He has been the vice president with Clinton. He certainly knew about the Rockefeller Initiative. There was no way in hell he did not know about the Rockefeller Initiative. But unlike Bill Clinton, Al Gore was very much respected by the Department of Defense and the military. He was involved in serious matters such as arms limitation and what have you as a senator. And so he could have been a much more attractive president to address the truth embargo matter. He lost by one vote in the Supreme Court, and George H.W. Bush's son took over. And so whatever was possible then disappeared. And the Clintons made a very significant decision that, yeah, we engaged this issue. Yeah, we know that the ET presence is real, and I assure you they did. But we're standing completely out of it. Why? Right? Because Hillary Clinton absolutely was going to run for president. There was no doubt about it, which meant that whatever Bill might want to say or do about this wasn't going to happen. He was going to serve his wife's desires, and her desire was to be president. And obviously that was not going to happen until George Bush was out of office. And so they stood back. But they didn't want to get completely removed from this issue. In other words, this is a huge historical legacy, that effort to try to get this out. And the story is big. I mean, it extended into the second term, because it was in the second term, while they were trying to find something to bring Clinton down, is when the issue heated up again as you move towards the Roswell anniversary of 97, the 50th anniversary, which was projected to maybe 200,000 people are going to arrive in Roswell. You've got Philip Corso coming forward. You've got Stephen Schiff trying to get Roswell records. All of this is happening after his first term in 97. And so while they had him contained, this other stuff is happening. And so now he's still president, and that stuff is going down. And so they got even more serious. And so what the Department of Defense did is, one, they ignored Corso. Two, they held a press conference prior to the anniversary in Roswell, in which they trotted out the mogul balloon fiasco and the crash test dummies. But to their much greater disgrace, they spent many millions of dollars on a report from the Air Force under Air Force Secretary Sheila Wignall, who was a brilliant woman. And this whole thing was bogus. This Air Force report was a complete and total fraud, and it cost millions of bucks. And so that was going on. And so they get through that. Bush is now president. But that whole story, they weren't going to just leave. One day, the Clintons are going to tell you that story. One day, if they're still here, probably in the near future, they will come forward and they will tell you all about what happened back then. However, right, in the meantime, they have had to stay almost completely silent, but they still needed a connection to the issue. And what was that connection? John Podesta. John Podesta, their absolute consigliere, their advisor, and so forth, who's been with them all along, was the connection to the issue. And so after they leave office, John Podesta continues to engage in this issue and has ever since. In fact, he didn't wait at all. Within, it was all, see, Clinton leaves office in January of 2001, about 18 months later, 19 months later is when John Podesta turns up at the press club to introduce the brand new Coalition for Freedom of Information, which was being backed by sci-fi money in connection with the massive 20-hour series Taken, created by Steven Spielberg. As a public service thing, they were also launching an entity, a Washington-based real deal entity, not this amateur stuff like I do, to engage the issue and look for the truth. Coalition for Freedom of Information. Serious money, serious people. Introduced, but not directly involved with, but introduced by John Podesta with the famous intro, of which the full video is currently not available, though I hope to find it one day. But it's when he makes the statement that the people need to be told the truth. They have a right to know and need to know, and it's the law. I mean, this is a historical statement. I was sitting 5 feet from him when he said it, and my jaw hit the ground. And so he steps in there. And by the way, the Coalition for Information, which was directed by Leslie Kean, who has a close relationship with Podesta, the public relations firm that was selected was John Podesta's brothers, Tony's firm, the Podesta Mattoon, and then they had a K Street lawyer. I mean, it was a big deal. And so that's 2002, 19 months after Clinton leaves office. After that, he's writing forewords for Leslie's book. He's turning up in documentaries. He has always kept the connection between the Clintons and this issue alive as a surrogate, you might say. And they anticipated. And why would he do that? Because they felt pretty good that Secretary Clinton was going to win the presidency in 2008, right? I don't think they had much expectation that she could win the presidency in 2004, particularly after 9/11 and after the Iraq War. It wasn't going to happen. And so, but 2008, oh yes. And so he kept that connection alive, and the 2008 campaign begins, right? And of course, I saw that as a golden opportunity, right? She's running for president. We've got the Rockefeller Initiative documents. They're online. We've got the perfect means to connect her to the issue, which I thought she might very well embrace. And so I'm pushing out as much as I can and going to journalists and telling them about it and what have you. And in fact, the culmination of that was that in 2007, during the campaign, at the 60th anniversary of Roswell, I'm at Roswell, and I'm there, and we're celebrating the 60th anniversary of the Roswell event. And I get a phone call from Fox News saying, "We want to interview you." I said, "Okay, where?" In the trailer. And they had a trailer, right? And so I go over to the Fox News trailer. It's one of these, semi trucks. I get in, and there's a tin can I'm sitting on, and they got a monitor set up. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm looking at the monitor, and up comes the show. I think it was Fox and Friends or something like that. And when that when that thing flashed up, it was a moment for me. And I'll tell you why. Because the tact I was using to connect the Clinton campaign to the ET issue appropriately was the ET ticket. And the reason that I was using that meme is that as of that time, July of 2007, Bill Richardson, the governor of Mexico, was really considered a very likely presidential candidate. In other words, a selection. That there was a lot of reasons why she would have picked him to be her presidential running mate, which he hadn't done yet. And then I'm thinking, look at it. You've got the Clintons with the connection to the issue. You've got the governor of New Mexico. That is the ET ticket, isn't it? And so I put that out there. And so when this thing flashes up on the screen, they've got a big graphic of Hillary Clinton. They've got a big graphic of Bill Richardson. And in the middle is the phrase ET ticket. And so I had about 5 minutes to sort of talk about that. I threw in the Rockefeller Initiative, did what I could, and there you go. All right. And so I head back from Roswell to DC, and I'm figuring, all right, what next? How are we going to do this? How are we going to connect her to the issue? Knowing that it wasn't going to hurt her. It was never going to hurt her, but whatever. But before we could do anything else, things kind of went bad. And what happened is the Clintons did not handle the campaign well. They started making some serious mistakes. And most of those mistakes involved how they dealt with the candidacy of Barack Obama. And what happened then was that the Democrats basically were impaled upon their own petard by virtue of the fact that they had created this idea of superdelegates, which was a big mistake. It may still be intact. I don't know. I think they may have modified it. But what superdelegates are is they are individuals, because of their stature, actually their votes count more than just a single delegate. All right. They have this extra vote, meaning my vote counts 5 or something. They're called superdelegates. Big mistake. Why? Because many of these superdelegates were people of color. And when they started mishandling the campaign as regards Barack Obama, these superdelegates started breaking ranks. And once they switched over, it created an avalanche, and her campaign was over. And so she loses the election, and Barack Obama becomes the president in 2009. And so at that point, the truth embargo process is really kind of stuck. We're getting media, websites are being created, conferences are being held. The UAP, ET, disclosure, activist, research, documentarist community never stopped. They're always doing their thing, but they're just not getting, how would you say, the chops. They're not getting the big Hollywood money. They're not getting the serious news coverage. But we're still pushing forward. We never stopped. And so now we're entering the Obama administration. And the question was, what would happen then? It's 2009, or it's the transition period, late 2008, 2009. And not totally to my surprise, what happened, and I noted this with great interest, that first of all, Obama selected who? John Podesta to help him form the new government. John Podesta was hip deep in the Rockefeller Initiative and the effort to, quote, get the UFO files, and said, well, that's interesting. And who did Barack Obama and John Podesta select as the Secretary of State? Hillary Clinton, who was hip deep in the Rockefeller Initiative. And who did they select as their Secretary of Defense? I think it was Secretary of Defense. It could have been CIA director because he was both, but I think it was Secretary of Defense. Leon Panetta. And who was Leon Panetta? Leon Panetta was the chief of staff to Clinton during the Rockefeller Initiative. So he fully knew about the Rockefeller Initiative and the effort by Rockefeller to assist the president in getting all the UFO files out of the DOD. He, was the Secretary of Defense. And so essentially Obama brought the Rockefeller Initiative people right into his administration. And I'm thinking, well, that's interesting. So would that mean that Obama might go there? That he could end up being the disclosure president? And so obviously we're working that angle. However, it didn't happen. And the reasons I think are pretty straightforward. He was the first African American person of color president in history. He had an obligation to minorities unlike any president ever. And there were plenty of things happening in the world. His was not going to be an easy presidency. And so the idea that he would take up the mantle of disclosure was asking a lot, though he did have the people around him to do it. But he didn't. However, the one thing, though, that almost certainly did happen is you can absolutely be sure that if Barack Obama came into the White House in 2009, not knowing there was an extraterrestrial presence, he sure as hell found out pretty soon from either Hillary Clinton, John Podesta, Leon Panetta, or President Clinton himself. And so throughout the entire administration of Barack Obama, he knew there was an extraterrestrial presence. And so those years were interesting, right? The media coverage continued. They wouldn't cover the Rockefeller Initiative, right? Virtually nothing still, even though the link was out there to all the documents. And so the status quo is kind of moving forward, but something else happens, right, in that era, right, that helps seal the doom of the truth embargo. And it starts happening just toward the end of the Clinton administration, something that the original founders of the truth embargo could not have anticipated in 1948, 53. The rise of global global citizen tech journalism. In other words, rise of the internet and the browser and email and texting and bulletin boards, all right, starts to grow and expand, right? And communications and ability to engage these issues worldwide is growing. And then comes in social media, right? The Facebook platform. And immediately thousands of pages devoted to the ET issue and groups are forming throughout Facebook. And they're communicating through DMs and so forth. And then comes Twitter. And I'm getting ahead of myself here, but what I'm saying is the rise of domestic journalism and communications on a global level for people in general, not just a few, but billions, literally starts at the beginning of the Obama administration and continues to this day. Once that started, the truth embargo was absolutely doomed. There was zero chance that it would last very long. And so that is happening during the Obama administration as we move forward. All right. And Secretary Clinton has every intention of running again. And we knew it. Everybody knew it. Right. And in this case, we're talking running again 16 years after her husband left office. 16 years that she was aware of the ET presence, aware of the legacy they have there, right? What it would mean, certainly, if she was the disclosure president. And so starting around 2013, 2012, everybody has pretty much got a pretty good idea of what is coming. And then the question is, what the hell was I going to do? In general, what was the activist movement going to do? What was I going to do? Well, I got lucky. And out of nowhere, a substantial amount of money became available to me beyond anything I'd ever seen. I mean, it was just really quite exceptional. Opening up the option of being able to do a project that I'd wanted to do for almost 12 years. And thus came the citizen hearing on
2013.
To create an event in 2013 that was part of a larger strategy to ensure that when Hillary Clinton entered the White House, her ability and willingness to end the truth embargo would be served immediately. In other words, Hillary Clinton becomes president, and very shortly after that, disclosure takes place. All right, that was the game plan starting 2013. And so we held the citizen hearing on disclosure, a mock congressional hearing at the National Press Club upstairs from where I'm officed right now. It cost a lot. We brought in 42 witnesses from 10 countries to testify for 30 hours over a week, from May 30 to May 29 to June 5. And we were able to secure the services of 6 former members of Congress, five House members and 1 senator, and they conducted this mock hearing exactly like a real hearing, because they'd done plenty of those. They know exactly how to do it. And so this mock congressional hearing was held, and 42 witnesses testified, took an oath, right, sat down, and presented in an orderly fashion information regarding a range of issues related to the UAP ET presence in this world and the truth embargo. It was filmed completely from start to finish. It was live broadcast, right, on streaming in 4 different languages. It cost way too much, but got a little carried away. The event itself was important, right? And the record of it was important, but the live streaming was important too. And the reason for that was this. One of the biggest obstacles to engaging the politicians and the media is the stigma, the ridicule that the truth embargo has heaped on this issue since day one, preventing politicians and journalists and scientists and anybody else with a credential and a life and a decent paycheck from touching it. And so by streaming it, we made it possible for any politicians or staff or any fine journalists to watch it from the comfort and protection of their office or home without having to actually come down to the press club and be seen, heaven forbid, watching this mock congressional hearing. And one of the messages we were trying to send to those people, whether they were there or whether they were watching from home, this is what a hearing would kind of look like. And guess what? It's pretty cool. It's perfectly fine. Everybody is sane. The information is great. The audience is enthralled. This is what it would be like, folks. So, think about doing one yourself. So that was finished in June of 2013. Now, the next step was to get all of that footage into a DVD set. That took a while. And that DVD set became available to me in December of 2013, right? And I got this right. No, it took a good while, a lot longer than I had wanted it to, but it became available to me in November of 2014. And at that point, of course, her campaign was moving along. Her ratings were sky high. Everything is great. So in 2014, we then delivered a full 30-hour set, DVD set, of that citizen hearing on disclosure to every single congressional office, all 535. So they had it. Watch it, don't watch it, whatever. All these 535 sets were floating around Capitol Hill, right? So that, 1, we could say we did it, and 2, those that watched it would see, hey, this is what a hearing would look like. That was done, and immediately, working with my publicist, Janet Donovan of Creative International and Creative Enterprises International, one of the legends of public relations in Washington, D.C. She knows everybody: senators, congressmen, ambassadors, their wives, their cooks, their chauffeurs. She's a legend. And so we immediately went to work to create a mass media engagement of the ET connection between Hillary Clinton and this subject, right? So that it would be literally following her through her campaign to become president in 2017. And it worked. Working from DC, working from my office here, and with the aid of Janet, we ultimately generated 400 media articles regarding the ET connection of the Clintons, the Rockefeller Initiative, and so forth. 400 articles. And the result of all this media pressure, though they did not give a full-out interview to any significant journalist, didn't happen. They couldn't go there. What they had to do was to speak to it in a somewhat safe mode. And so she and her husband and even Barack Obama were making appearances on talk shows like Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel and so forth, Ellen DeGeneres. So these are like scripted, careful, perfectly safe venues, and they spoke to the issue and so forth. And every time one of them would speak to the issue, it would generate scores and scores of articles. And all of this was following her through the campaign. It was the summum bonum of my career, right? In my, as far as I was concerned, right? And so it did everything we could have hoped to do. And those 400 articles are up on my website right now. You go to paradigmresearchgroup.org, you go to the project section, Maine, go down to the election initiative, and there's this huge page there which basically describes and provides links to the whole shebang. We completely connected her to this issue as he moved forward. And I followed it very closely. And I can say with complete confidence that everything they said on this issue and every article that was written about her connection to this issue, including the New York Times and the Washington Post, did not hurt her campaign an iota. It did not in any way hurt her ability to win that election. And so as we're marching towards the election, optimism is high. I'm ecstatic. I felt I knew exactly what was going to take place. And then history stepped in again, as it often has on this issue. And a couple of things happened which I didn't see coming, right? One of them was, and I mean, again, bizarre stuff, but hey, let's face it. The last 15 years is just one bizarre thing after another. We live in interesting times, all right? And if you don't like interesting times, go to the Caribbean and just live on the beach or something, because it ain't going to change. And so the first thing that happened is that Julian Assange, who is a major figure, an extraordinary man who's done extraordinary things and who I had nothing but respect for. He's a hyper journalist. He went political. He made a colossal mistake and went political and did something I hope he regrets to this day. Instead of getting a tranche of information, quickly going over it, the odd redaction, and then shoving it out the door for the world to review at their pleasure, which is what he had always done, he did something else. And the reason he did it was personal. He did not like Hillary Clinton. In fact, he hated her because she had made some statements about him which were not exactly flattering. And I think she was even calling for draconian action to be taken against him. And so he thought that was hypocritical, and he just didn't like her. And so what he chose to do at the very end of the campaign was to put out 25,000, or was it 50,000? I think 50,000 documents that he had gotten from John Podesta's server and also from the DNC. And he waited, and instead of dumping them, he put them out in tranches of 5,000 a day or every other day for a couple of weeks to maximize the impact. He absolutely wanted to defeat Hillary Clinton. And at that point, he's no longer a journalist, he's an activist. And he damaged the campaign big time. It was really a serious, serious problem. And whoa. The DNC documents were very damaging. And then, of course, there was a lot of issues within the Podesta's documents. And so this was a problem. There were other mistakes that the campaign made at that point. And before you know it, the election is over and she has lost. But something did happen at the end of that campaign that by and large did not hurt her, but was very important to the disclosure process. And that is within the documents that were released by Assange from Podesta's file was a number of emails. I think it was, 70, 80, something like that. They're on my website in the blog. I actually have them all there with some commentary in each one. And these were emails regarding an approach that was being made to John Podesta by Tom DeLonge regarding something that they were up to, something they were doing. He was introducing them to people. They sat down for an interview. There were some exchanges, and it was about UFOs. Now, I wasn't shocked that John Podesta was maybe exchanging emails with people that might have UFOs in it, right? I'm sure he didn't want those to see the light of day, but I wasn't shocked about that. I already knew about the connection going all the way back to 1993. The point is that who was Tom DeLonge? Why was he engaging him so extensively and introducing him to inside people? And so that was notable, but we found out about that at that time. The election was over, and the entire effort, starting in 2013, running right up until Election Day, was done, cooked, baked, finished, over. Nothing. I went into what I would call a distressed time, feeling a little, I don't know. I was not in good shape. I left the country. I went to England, where I have a supporter, and I stayed there and just sort of contemplated what was going to happen next. And I stayed there from April to February of 2018. The one good thing that happened while I was there is I had a chance to go to Moscow and give an interview to the most popular news network in Russia, where I actually discussed the issue of disclosure as well as the potential for Vladimir Putin, the Vladimir Putin of then, 2017, not the Vladimir Putin of today. No one had ever done this. There have been people that have gone to Russia, particularly George Knapp. A lot of people have gone over and done some great research, but no one had ever talked about it in that way politically. And I was able to do that. And then when I got back, shortly after that, while I'm in the UK, out of the country, off the field, out of the stadium, the To the Stars Academy turns up out of nowhere. And we learn why Tom DeLonge was engaging John Podesta back in 2015, 16. And not, by the way, the Republican Party. No, just the Democratic Party. We learned why. Something was happening inside the military intelligence complex. And that began the last, I guess you could say, that began the two-act play, which would finally end the truth embargo. It began on October 11th with the emergence of the To the Stars Academy advisory team. It kicked into high gear on December the 16th, 17th with the articles in the New York Times. It developed behind the scenes mostly, but also very much out in public media for the next couple of years. And then in 2000, and the first act ended in 2020, December of 2020. And the second act, the last act, began in December of 2020 with the passage of the first NDA bill containing the first legislation ever regarding the UAP matter, put in there by Marco Rubio. And between December of 2020 and today, the second act of this play has been unfolding. We are virtually at the end of the play. And what comes next is the epilogue. And the epilogue is disclosure from the President of the United States. So there's your history from 1990 on. I appreciate your patience.
That was awesome. Pull myself up real quick. Yeah, that was just, man, I don't know about your memory there, guy. I'm 61, and I couldn't have pulled that all together, even if I lived through it like you did. So what a great historical perspective. Let me put us all back in. And, it just is interesting to see how close we came at different points in history to knowing what we are desperately wanting to know today. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just amazing how close we came in the matter of who was elected, when it happened, what the events that were taking place around the world, how all of that impacted it. Now, I did have a question to you. I can understand the media and their complacency a little bit when you look at national security. But the one thing I don't understand, Steve, is academia. I don't understand why they were so afraid to address this issue? Do you have any insights on that?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Um, well, there's a number of factors. First of all, there is the issue of tenure. Our American universities are pretty much, by and large, all part of the tenure system. There are some exceptions, and essentially, tenure is a problem. It was created. The concept was created in service to what we'll call freedom of acquiry, right? To protect you from the government or others that would want to silence you because they don't like what you're teaching or studying. And so it would be very difficult to get you removed from office because you, quote, have tenure. All right, I get that. And in order to get tenure, you had to be very good at what you do, and you had to have substantial credentials and what have you. But turned into poison pill. Here's what tenure means now. If you don't have it, you got to constantly be careful that you don't do anything that could prevent you from getting it. And so in addressing as a non-tenured professor or teacher at a university, the UAP issue about ETs that the government makes quite clear don't exist at all, and it's gone to great lengths to point out that anybody that thinks so is an idiot or insane, you're not going to touch it. Okay, now once you get tenure, okay, now you're set, right? You can virtually not be removed. And so you got a great job, you're making some decent money, and you're protected. And so, yeah, theoretically, you could jump into the ET issue and say some bold things and start teaching it in your physics class or something. But you know that you're going to have a problem. You're still going to have a problem. Just because you're tenured doesn't mean that people can't raise hell, can't call for your dismissal. It just means that you've got an extra level of protection. And so you've got these professors that they can teach and they can do things and they have a little latitude. Why on earth do you want to take on the national security state on an issue of that magnitude? Why would you do that? Overall, no. You've got it made. Don't rock the boat. One of the few exceptions to this was David Jacobs, professor of history at Temple, which, by the way, had a program there that dealt with the paranormal issues, just like Duke did, which were eventually shut down. Also at Princeton, what can I say? But Jacobs, he was a fine professor and well-liked. And David Jacobs had got into investigating the contact issue. He was dealing with contactees. He was doing regressions and things like that on his own. But he was a well-liked professor. He was competent. And he was able to convince Temple to allow him to teach a course. I think it was one per semester, but whatever, over a number of years, addressing the phenomena. I don't know the details of the course. I don't know to what extent he got into contact. It might have been general, but he was allowed to do that. And I remember many years ago talking with David. Of course, I admired the hell out of him for doing that. And I said, David, I think it's amazing that you were able to do that and teach these courses, and the Temple is kind enough to let you do it. And clearly that's quite an accomplishment. And he said to me, yeah, but I'll never be a professor. He was an associate professor. We're talking like 20 years ago. He was an associate professor. He said, I'll never be a professor. He retired recently as an associate professor. All right. I'm not aware of any other David Jacobs. So that was one problem. But there's another problem, okay? Grants. American universities in the science area, and there's a whole lot of science associated with the ET issue, very much dependent upon substantial grants from either the government, sometimes government contractors, and so forth, right? And the truth embargo, uber all. And so if you as a university want to go there, you may suddenly start finding your grants disappear. And so on that basis alone, the universities, not going to go there. Not going to go there. Now, there are some colleges out there that don't have any grants. Like a pure liberal arts college, they haven't grants from any government or anything, and they're kind of independent, like the New School, which, by the way, is under heavy attack in Florida. They're trying to kind of screw that up. I know about it because I went to another school close to it called, at that time, Florida Presbyterian. I knew about the New School. But in any event, these small schools, They don't have large endowments. They're not, not beholden to government grants or, defense contractor grants. But, it's just tough enough to keep going and be viable and get a reasonable number of students every year and just do your thing. And so there was just it was just too much to ask them to take on the mantle of this. And so when you add it all together, right, our entire university system, 5,000 colleges, universities, graduate programs, research, affiliates, and so forth, have stood silent while the most important sociological, political, and scientific event of our time has been going on literally over their head for 3/4 of a century. What can I say?
I have another question for you, because you've been at this so long, and like I said, I appreciate your historical perspective, and you've been there for many decades. What is disclosure for you? I mean, a lot of people talk about it either being an event or a process. You've been trying to get us there, for all these decades. What is disclosure for you?
Yeah. Very good. Good question. I have my idea of disclosure, which coincides with a lot of people, but not everybody. But let me first make this point. Some people don't care about activism. They don't pay attention to it. They don't want to be an activist, and they could give a crap what I do. I get it. But the fact of the matter is that there isn't a single right and privilege that any of us enjoy to this day that did not come from activism. Period. There are no exceptions at all. Right. Zero. None. Okay. Agreed. And so activists are very important, and they help make the world a little more just, maybe a little more safe, a little more fair. The arc of the universe is long, but it tends towards justice. So if you're going to be an activist, you got to keep that in mind. It's a long arc. Okay. So what do you do? There's several things an activist must do. And one of them, and I say an activist movement must do. One of them, and let me preface that, all activism is pretty much the same. It's always trying to get authority to do something it doesn't want to do, right? Or to not do something that it shouldn't be doing. It's always that. It's always that. There are no exceptions. Okay. And so authority, being powerful and self-serving in many ways, simply doesn't want to cooperate, and you have to somehow get what you want, right? Whether it takes 1 year, 10 years, or 100 years. And that's activism. So what do you have to do to succeed? Well, there are a number of things. We don't want to spend a long time on this, but let me just say this. One of the things an activist has to do is change the language. You see, almost all injustice has its own language. In other words, the government, and of course, this is what Orwell was talking about. It turns up in a lot of books about these kinds of things. Propaganda refers to manipulative language for purpose. It can be for a good purpose, but usually it's not. And governments are great at it because they have the resources. But overall, what governments do is create a language which services their agenda. Okay, whatever that agenda is. If it's to oppress a certain group, they will develop language that services that oppression, right? And so what happens is the authority is creating this language, and before you know it, it's the language you have to use. I mean, that's the language that's out there. And so literally, in order to address the problem, you have to use the language that's supporting the problem, which makes it a hell of a lot harder. And so the activist steps in and says, we're going to change the language, not as a matter of propaganda, but we're going to change the language to terms that more accurately and appropriately describe what is going on. Because in most cases, an accurate description of what is going on is the fair and just description. All right. And so activists must change language. And when activists use really bad language or bad phrasing, it hurts. It can ruin them. It can destroy a movement overnight. We recently had an example of that. I'm not trying to pick on a particular group. I'm simply pointing out something that I think is almost self-evident. In the middle of the activist movement, which in a somewhat nebulous, it's not focused enough, but a nebulous effort to see police reform, because there's a lot of abuses of power by police in various districts and so forth in the United States. Not everywhere, but there's areas where it's awful. Some activists came up with the phrase that they thought was pretty cool, called defund the police.
Yeah.
And the moment I heard it, I said, that is a huge mistake, right?
Well,
You just handed them, you just handed them a rolling pin to beat you over the head with. All right, so you don't want to do that. So one of the things I started doing from 1996 on was change the language. How can we improve the language, right? And fortunately for me, I got lucky, because I got written up in the Washington Post and got a little cred, and then I got connected up with Art Bell as he was on the ascendant, on his way to an 8-9 million person audience, late night radio, and so he decided he was going to go. He would go with exopolitics, even though he hated politics in general. And he brought me on, and suddenly I got an audience of 8 million people. I think I've done like 50 shows on coast to coast, but I don't know, 10, 15, 20 with Art. And so I'm able to go on those. And so what I did was use those appearances to work on the language. And one of the first things I brought up on the show was that the phrase UFO cover-up was wrong. It was a mistake, right? Stop using that phrase. The government loves it when you use that phrase. Don't do that. Why? Because one, the term UFO was corrupted. It had already been bastardized, polluted, right? It was like a polluted stream. There was some perfectly fine water there. They dumped a lot of, crap in it. Now you can't drink from it. But if you want to drink from it, that's fine, because it's going to kill you, and the government would love that. Okay, so it was a polluted term. And so that was a problem. But the other problem is that cover-up was a mistake. Why? Because realistically, fairly, if you look at the history of this issue, the decision to embargo the reality of the ET presence as initially manifest in Roswell was a absolutely legal national security decision on the part of the United States government at the time, under even without the 1947 Intelligence Act, Classification Act, but with it most certainly. And therefore, it's always been a legal policy. You don't cover up legal acts. Therefore, cover up implies criminality, which means that you are saying that the government and everybody in it that has anything to do with the subject are criminals. Right. And they aren't. Okay, so now you're criminalizing the people you want to convince, the people that you want to come out and support you. You're basically said you're all criminals. Big, bad idea. And so I said, that's not it. And I came up with the idea of truth embargo. I said, it's a truth embargo. That's what it is. Truth embargo. Okay.
Let me ask you a quick question, Steve, because I think some people are going to come back on this, and I think you can clarify it. That doesn't mean that there weren't criminal acts committed by some in authority, correct?
Absolutely.
That would not exclude that.
The fundamental policy was legal. Okay. Mm-hmm. And there's lots of examples of that. You have plenty of legal policies the government pursues, but somebody within or dealing with that policy may do something that's criminal. That doesn't criminalize the policy. So I got that. And then the next thing was bigger. What was the next thing that I sought to do, taking advantage of Art Bell's audience, 9 million people, which is plenty of people. I don't care if they're truckers driving across the country. That's a lot of people. And you seed some ideas on 9 million people, and that's almost at that threshold level where it could literally take hold nationwide. And that was this. When I entered the field in 96, there was not what I considered a defined activist movement. There had been the odd effort here, the odd effort there, but there was not. The environmental had a fully activist movement. The anti-war movement was fully developed. The anti-nuke movement was developed, but not the issue of ending the truth embargo. It was still maturing. Okay. And so I wanted to see what I could do to help it achieve what we'll call a proper activist movement status. And in order to do that, you have to have a prize. There has to be a prize at the end of the process. And the reason I use the word prize is because there was an extraordinary documentary. I think it won awards many years ago, which you can find if you look hard enough. I probably should watch it again. And it was called, and I believe I have it correctly, Eye on the Prize. Eye on the Prize. It might have been Keep the Eye on the Prize, but I believe it was Eye on the Prize. And it was an extensive, almost Ken Burns-like documentary of the civil rights movement, right? And what was the prize that one had to keep their eye on during the 100 years, well, almost 100 years that the civil rights movement was what I would call a true movement, which is from the end of when Reconstruction failed after the Civil War until when? Until we finally passed the Civil Rights Act in the United States in 1964. That was the prize that essentially they were seeking. And so everybody that got into the civil rights movement, they may have had this aspiration and that aspiration, and they may have had a lot of things they wanted to see happen, and they did. But there was one defined prize. Everybody, with few exceptions, wanted that prize, and that was the signing by the president of a Civil Rights Act ending segregation. And they got it in 1964. What was the prize of the massive movement in India led by Mahatma Gandhi and also the Muslim leaders as well? It was pretty clear what the prize was. It was hard, not hard at all. The British left. Gone. Goodbye. Sayonara. Out of here. You're not ruling anything anymore. That was the prize. And it was well defined, and they got that prize. And we can go on, activist movement after. What was the prize in the ET issue? Well, it didn't have a defined one. There were people like Stephen Greer and others that were using the term disclosure in their work, even calling, like in the case of Greer, he called his key project at the time the Disclosure Project, which led to the very important May 9th, 2001 press conference. But he was using that term disclosure in the context of what I would call small d disclosure, right? It's capital D if you're naming the project, but small d disclosure. The Disclosure Project was about the revealing process. It was going to assist the revealing process that would bring out the information confirming the truth of the ET reality. And the government would eventually have to hold its hands up and say, hey, you got us. It's true. You've proved it. It's true. It's happening. All right. Well, fine. Right. And this disclosure process has been going on since day one. It's been going on relentlessly, driven by citizen science, activist, research, journalist movement. Right. Somewhat assisted by American journalism, which did write up article after article about things that were happening in the public space. That was also disclosure. Its disclosure process is in these books behind me. Most have been written by people that don't have Harvard degrees, right? And self-funded in many cases. The disclosure process has been underway for 76 years. But that's not the prize. I said, what is the prize? Simple. Confirmation.
That's what I was going to say.
Not from the undersecretary of the secretary to the whatever, not from some astronaut. Confirmation from the president of the United States or from the prime minister of the UK. It had to be a formal confirmation from the president. And until that happened, the list of things that would not happen, would not follow, that needed to follow, were simply not going to take place. Period. It weren't going to happen, right? You know, Edgar Mitchell came forward, said there's an ET present. Nothing didn't happen. But Robert Bigelow came forward on 60 Minutes, said there was an ET present. No, nothing. Recently, Gary Nolan went on Tucker Carlson, said there's an ET present. He's a Nobel Prize nominee. And others have done the same thing. No. The doors didn't open. Legislation didn't begin. Nothing. It had to be the president. And so I call that capital D disclosure. creating a certain amount of confusion. But I didn't want to. I felt, even though it created some confusion, I didn't want to separate it from all of the disclosure work, the revelation work that was going on, because it feeds to the ultimate. So the small d disclosure efforts on the part of huge numbers of people ultimately leads to the capital D disclosure event, which is the confirmation. The moment the words come out of the president's mouth, and I assure you, it will not be an email or a text, all right, or a letter delivered to the Congress. It will come out of the mouth of the president of the United States that we are not alone and that there is an extraterrestrial, non-human biological presence in this world. That is disclosure. It could take 15 seconds. Boom. That's it. That's the prize. That is the prize of this movement. And that is, to me, perhaps my most important contribution. And the people that supported it and have used it, I thank them. But it has created confusion, and I have to explain it over and over and over again. But I don't mind. And so there's two very significant language issues that I've referred to, and let me refer to one more. UFO. Remember, UFO cover-up had to go because cover-up was wrong and UFO was polluted. So we got truth embargo, but we still had UFO. UFO was the term universally in whatever language. In Spanish, it's ovni. That's what you have. If you want to talk about this issue, that's what you had to say. What are you interested in? Well, I'm interested in UFOs. What did you see the other day? I saw a UFO. It was in the articles. It was here. It was everywhere. It was the term, period. There wasn't another term. And guess what? That term, as you know, had been poisoned, right?
Right.
It shoved a lot of polonium down its throat. And so every time you used the word, you were literally spitting into the wind. And I'm going, well, we got to stop that. What are we going to do? And so I, along with others, some time ago said we need another term. UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena. Okay? UAP.
What do you think about NHI?
Exactly the same thing. It means exactly the same thing. There's not an iota difference, except the water hasn't been poisoned yet. It's not bastardized. It's not corrupted, and we started to get that out there. And there was a moment, right, when I guess you could say it became official. Not everybody, was particularly fond of that moment, but it occurred on the Jimmy Kimmel show when Secretary Clinton went on for, I think, the first time, might have been the second time. Her husband had already been on. And he brought up, I think, her husband's statement to some degree and regarding the UFO. And she immediately interrupted and said, Jimmy, there's a new term now. It's called unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP. And I'm just sitting there grinning like a Cheshire cat going, thank you, Secretary Clinton. Okay. And so it worked. So when the second act of the play, which we've not discussed and probably can't today, come back anytime you want, begins in December of 2020 with the passage of the 2020-2021 NDAA bill with language sponsored by Marco Rubio. UFO is nowhere in sight. It's UAP. UAP. They formalized an entity over at the Office of Naval Intelligence and called it the UAP Task Force. Fine, good. And the journalists were using UAP, and the politicians were. Why? Because it was okay. It was a safe term now. You could use that without immediately triggering that backlash. So that language
negative reaction
facilitated the engagement of the politicians and the journalists, which is what we had to have. All right. So there is three very significant things. Now I'll add a epilogue to that, which amuses me to no end, but I love, is that in the term UAP also underwent transformation as the legislation moved forward and the understanding of the issue expanded in the minds of the politicians, because the ET issue is a lot more than just some metal stuff flying around over our head, right? Okay. They're underground, they're in the ocean, they're in space, they're doing all kinds of things. And so it shifted, it changed about a couple of times and landed on I'm sorry.
Anomalous.
Landed on a not arrow. Again, I'm tired.
Okay.
Unidentified anomalous
all domain-
phenomena.
I'm sorry. Unexplained. No. Arrow stands.
Unidentified
all
anomalous phenomena.
No, it's not unidentified. Arrow.
All domain.
All domain
All
anomaly.
domain anomaly resolution office. Okay.
Office, yeah.
Which also ends in O, arrow. Okay. Now, let me tell you, this is not an accident. Okay. So UFO becomes UAP, which becomes unidentified aerial phenomena, unexplained aerial phenomena, which also becomes unexplained anomalous phenomena, and on, and eventually ends up with this all domain anomaly resolution office. Perfect language, the right name, the right anyway, the right arrow. Okay, so uh, you see that process. Now, here is the point I want to make. Over the last 3 years, from when that first legislation began, the stigma starts falling away from this issue. The water in the pond starts to get purified, right? It's run through a purification system, reverse osmosis. And after about a year and a half, the water was cleaned up. And you know what happened? UFO is back. UFO is back. It's in the mouths of politicians and journalists. It's turning up in articles, and nobody is even blinking an eye. And to me, that is a tremendous recognition of all the work that was done for all of those years. What that is saying is, yes, we demeaned and ridiculed, isolated this term and but you were right. You were always right. And appreciation for all of your tenacity and work and search for the truth. We're giving you your term back. It's okay to say UFO. Now, I should point out that in this current bill, which has got 73 pages, and it's going to be passed, I think, intact in December of this year, the UFO is in there once as a definition, right? So that people know what that stands for, and that's the only place. But unidentified aerial phenomena is in the bill 141 times in this bill. All right.
I don't want to cut you off, but I want to make sure that we give Rob an opportunity to ask you a couple questions. Then I may have one or two after that, and then I want to go ahead and talk about disclosure, possibility of disclosure.
Yeah, what's happening right now? Absolutely.
Right. And stuff. But I want to give Rob an opportunity to ask you a couple questions before I may have one or two, and then I'm going to go on to that as well.
Yes, sir. Rob.
You're up, buddy.
You had talked about the truth embargo for 75 years, and most people know about the OSI and the CIA and their efforts, like with Doty and them, that created the stigma and ensured it was alive and well. Do you think that there's been any lessening of that? I mean, I know it's gone from official policies to more unofficial, and they've not only affected the media and academia, but also foreign countries, to where they're also pressured to not give any validity to this topic. And as long as that firewall is still up, we're still fighting an uphill battle. But I think that there's being holes punched through it, day by day, by, no small effort with people, including yourself. Obviously they can't have any policies right now that are still in place officially, but it seems by name only that they've taken out the legal establishment of it, but it seems the essence is still thriving, and that seems to be not insurmountable, but a challenge. But also, do you see that perhaps the phenomena itself is affecting people that would normally otherwise be predictable, but there's been one-off instances like Assange that did things completely out of character that would directly affect this in an opposite way, to where perhaps it's partly shaping this?
Okay, two questions. going to disagree with you. Uh, all due respect. Uh, I'm not, I've been talking about this a lot lately. I'm not a researcher. I can't go into a particular case like Roswell down to the granular details. And that's true of almost any aspect of this field. As an activist, that's not what you do. What you do is you try to get a relatively comprehensive sense of the full picture to the extent that you can. And the way that one of the key reasons I was able to do this was the thousands and thousands of hours I invested because of my OCD powers in creating the print media archive of 15,000 articles. I mean, you read 15,000 articles, you get a pretty good overview of things, okay? I have the time to do that. Most people don't, and I appreciate that. But what the activist does, I mean, we talked about what activists do, what you have to do. Another thing the activist has to do is find a vantage point. Now, what do I mean? Here's a good analogy. This turns up in films all the time, right? A group of people, usually made up of the lead actors and a couple of minor actors who invariably get killed off at some point. They're going through some forest, woods, whatever, and they're lost. They don't know where the hell they are. And so one of the stars points at some character, some sort of extra actor and says, hey, Joe, climb that tree here. Climb that tree. Get up there and tell us where the hell we are. Right? Where did we just come from and where are we going? Get a vantage point so we can see what the hell's going on. Sometimes it's get up on top of the mountain so your Wi-Fi will work or the phone or whatever the hell. It's all about getting a vantage point. So the guy climbs a tree and he's saying, oh, yeah. We need to be going that way, right? Just kind of head towards, whatever. And so off they go. And they get where they go. This is what activists have to do. They have to find and identify where we need to go, in addition to how we need to get there, but where we need to go by getting to a vantage point where they can kind of see the overview and where things have come from and where they need to go next. Now, there is the absolute most eloquent and famous example of this, as stated by an activist, refers to Dr. Martin Luther King in his I Have a Dream speech. Well worth listening to once every couple of years. And in this speech, toward the end, he makes everybody knows this, and of course it's incredibly powerful. But in this speech, for those that remember, he gets to the point where he says, I have been to the mountaintop. I have seen the other side, right? And he says that a couple of times. And he finishes up by saying, I may not get there with you. What was he trying to say there? He was trying to say, I have been to the mountaintop and I have seen where you are going to go, where you need to go. A world when little white children and black children can sit down and play together and so forth and so forth. In other words, I have gone to that vantage point and I have seen where you need to go, which is what people need to know because they're down there in their lives, down there at tree level, trying to get by and survive and do what they got to do. They haven't got time to climb mountains. And so my job is vantage point. And I have gotten there. I mean, I've got a pretty good overview of what the hell's going on. And, I've had a couple of chances to discuss this. I was almost on News Nation, and just before I was supposed to go on, boom, got a call. You're not on. You're out. And I was talked to in a way that, like, hey, we don't want you. It happened on another very significant program, and so somebody out there doesn't want me on talking about this, and it hasn't happened. Fortunately, I'm the friend of several hundred podcasters, and so I can talk all day long. But I haven't been on CNN, MSNBC, News Nation. I haven't been contacted by New York Times or Washington Post, even though I've been written up in those papers a number of times. And so this particular vantage point that I'm trying to project apparently is not resonating with people. But I don't give a damn. I'll just keep talking until they finally show up. And so what am I trying to say here? One, the stigma on this issue is virtually gone. Two, the truth embargo firewall has collapsed. Think of it as the Berlin Wall, right? They didn't have to take the whole damn Berlin Wall down. All they had to do was just crash through a couple of places and put the word out, come on over, and people flooded into East Germany. It took a while to take the rest of the wall down, but the moment that first part of the wall came down, it was done. That's already happened. The truth embargo wall is breached, period, and in several places. And so it's over. That's done. All right? Three, if you look at the situation realistically, there's no pushback at all. There's virtually nothing. All right. Small stuff, right? That mostly has to do with somebody slightly a little nonplussed or inconvenienced. Where's the pushback from the Air Force, the Navy, the Army? Where's the pushback from the CIA? Zip. You know what you got from the CIA? You got a career CIA guy called Jim Semivan coming out with the To the Stars Academy, putting out his resume, and then telling people later he's a contactee. That's where the CIA is. Okay. Where's the pushback from the DOD? Susan Gao going out in the early days, not knowing what the hell is going on and saying, I don't know about this ATIP and who is Lou Elizondo. Later, they had to come back and go, oh, no, it's okay. That's not pushback. That's confusion. Because let me tell you, Tom DeLonge and the To the Stars guys didn't notify the entire government that they were going to do that. That was a surprise. All right. And so pushback? There's no pushback. Now, everybody is poised to watch for it. The U.S. government has done enough terrible things in my lifetime and has lied enough times and killed enough people and done really some bad things that it really hasn't accounted for and apologized for enough, and there hasn't been enough retribution and or compensation. I get that. And so trust in government has kind of collapsed, and so everybody is crawling around QAnon and buying into every conspiracy there is, demonizing the entire government, and democracy is kind of in danger. I get that too. All right. And so, in anything you try to do, there's going to be some people going, but overall, when you think about it, it's practically nothing. Now, let me give you some examples that people are thinking are pushback that aren't. All right. When David Grush comes forward, he was not supposed to do that. Even though they knew he was unhappy, even though they'd been dealing with him for almost 2 years, they did not think he would do that. He would go that far. And they were wrong, because David Grush is a righteous guy, a serious dude. He's got a lot of guts, right? Mm-hmm. Not only did he survive 2 terms in Iraq, he comes back and survives the PTSD and the problems it created for him, gets his life back together so well they give him a security clearance back. This is no guy you want to screw around with. Okay, he is a serious guy. And so when they did not properly address his issues, and it wasn't necessarily the government's fault, he went to Arrow expecting Arrow to respond to what he would learn, and Arrow couldn't respond to it. Arrow wasn't set up to respond to it. Arrow is nothing but a placeholder, a Potemkin village set up in preparation for the post-disclosure world. I'll get into this more if you want me to later. Everything that you've seen that has been done has absolutely nothing to do with trying to figure out this phenomena. They already know about this phenomena. Nothing to do with it at all. Every nickel they've spent, not that much, has nothing to do with learning about this phenomena. It is nothing more than preparation for the post-disclosure world, having everything in place when the president makes the announcement, so they don't have to run around trying to put it together in a world that is actually somewhat intense. Okay, so it's prudent and appropriate, and they're doing it right. Except because of the truth embargo, they can't tell you why they're doing it. They have to act like they're doing it to find out about the phenomena. So Grush was not part of the play. He wasn't supposed to happen. So when Grush came forward, he created a lot of trouble for a number of people. It was just awkward. And so somebody, who the hell knows, who was upset by that, manages to get one of his medical documents out. All right. And immediately the people jumped on it. My God, the CIA is making its move. They're going to take him down. They're going to close it all down. And no. It was one person irritated to put that out there. And then you had a situation where Sean Kirkpatrick, who was in the impossible position of being the head of Arrow, which is not supposed to do anything yet, and he's not supposed to say anything really consequentially yet. Suddenly having David Grush announcing that we've got ET craft and bodies, and he's thinking, well, 100 reporters are going to be coming over to my office tomorrow and wanting to know all about that, and I can't say anything about that. I'm in an impossible position, and man, I'm angry, and so he fires off a very negative letter regarding Kirkpatrick. It was a mistake. He shouldn't have done it, but I understand why he did it. Is that pushback? No, it is not. All right. Danny Sheehan has had multiple meetings with the IG office of the DOD, right? After he met a couple of times, they wanted to meet again. And Danny says to the Inspector General's office, he says, look, we can speed things up here. If instead of me coming in and meeting with just one person at a time, why don't you bring in the heads of all of the various offices in the Inspector General's office so we can all talk together? And that's what they did. They brought them all together so Danny could address them all at once. Grush goes to the IG office of the intelligence community about his problem. Did he get pushed back? Did they throw him out? No. He was able to pick up McCullough, who was the former IG in the first IG to the intelligence community, to be his representative attorney. He got relief. It wasn't enough. McCullough, by the way, I believe, is now the attorney for Sol and Gary Nolan, right? Okay. Wow. This isn't pushback, folks. This is the government working as fast as it can to get on board and support what is coming, right? That is what's going on, Rob. So I'm going to have to respectfully disagree on that point. Yes, sir.
Well, no, I'm not arguing with you at all. And my perspective where I'm seeing pushback was where Mike Turner and them are trying to prevent the Schumer Amendment from being enacted through the House. And where Kirkpatrick had claimed that
Turner is not doing that. He is not trying to prevent that bill from being passed in the House. This is a misconception. Okay.
Steve, what about the oversight committees, though? Didn't he try to stop any further hearings in the oversight committee?
I know. Again, I'm going to keep bringing this up. Vantage point. What you know is based on the vantage point that you have. Okay. Here is what I know from the vantage point that I'm at. All right. Okay. Here is what happened. David Grush came forward. He wasn't supposed to, but we know why he did it. And ultimately history is going to reward him. And ultimately it's all going to work out. But boy, he threw he dropped something in the punch bowl at the fraternity party. All right. Okay. And so created a problem. And here is what happened after that. And again, we're getting back to what you said, Rob. Vantage point. What did I see from the top of the tree? Grush comes forward on June the 5th. Huge articles follow. Scores and scores and scores of them. They're up on my website now. Go read them all. All right. The press just jumped on it. Okay, fine. Big deal. All my ripple effects here, there, whatever. So now those that are involved in the ongoing disclosure process, which is going to end the truth embargo, what do they do? And I was curious, what's going to happen? The heavily paranoid amongst us assumed that David Grush would suddenly disappear and never be seen again, right? He would do have a Putin thing happen where he accidentally dives off the 8th floor of a building. Whatever the hell. The point is that no. Here's what happened. 39 days later, after Grush comes forward with the somewhat premature and confirmed statement that we've got crashed ET vehicles and dead ETs, which confirms Roswell, which confirms the government's known about this all along, which is, again, awkward as hell, right? Mm-hmm. Because the president hasn't disclosed yet. 39 days later, out of the blue, the House Majority Leader, one of the most powerful men in Congress, one of the Gang of Eight, Chuck Schumer, gives I think it was a press release, and also might have been an interview where he states that I myself am putting some language in the next UAP bill in the current NDAA now under development. All right, meaning the Senate version. Chuck Schumer is going to do. And I'm going, hello. Hi, Chuck. How you doing? Wow. And what is it that you want to put in the bill? only this. It is my intention that language be in this bill that makes it quite clear that in terms of all ET technology, non-human technology of any kind, in the hands of non-governmental entities, meaning civilians, civilian companies, right? Meaning Lockheed Martin, right? And Grumman and all that stuff. We own it. It's government property. And if we have to, we will exercise eminent domain on it. He uses that phrase. We have eminent domain on all non-human technology anywhere in the United States or on United States territory, meaning if something's sitting on an embassy somewhere. Okay, now, my initial thought was, are you kidding me? I mean, this is huge, right? Most people, most average Americans wouldn't have thought twice about it. Okay, I knew what it meant. It was massive, absolutely massive. Because here, first of all, anything that's in the government's hands, sitting in, I don't know, Area 51 or whatever, anything that is part of the Air Force program, you don't need eminent domain for that. The government already has it. You only need eminent domain for that which is in the public arena. And what does the public arena include? Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, and all the defense contractors. He just sent a message to all of the defense contractors that have worked on ET tech in any way, shape, or form for 75 years. In case you have forgotten, we own it. Okay? But he goes further. And he says, now, don't get your, shorts in a knot or anything. First, we're going to give you 300 days from the signing of this act. 300 days is a long time. Don't get wrapped up in that date. Doesn't mean anything in terms of disclosure. 300 days to provide a full report of what you have, right? Okay. Just, give me a spreadsheet and just list all the stuff you got here and get that report to us so that we can review it and know that you have it. And I'm willing to bet that if any corporation leaves something off that report, that corporation is screwed. Because this isn't trivial stuff here. And so he just declared eminent domain, and he put that, he wants that in the act, where it currently sits right now on, and has been for months, on the Senate website. Now, people say, well, it won't pass. It won't pass. I think it will, but even if it gets pulled out, the message has been sent, hasn't it? He just it's been up there for months.
Yes.
Every single contractor in the country, every single operative in the country, every single person in a USAP program in the country can go and look at that damn website and see that Chuck Schumer's fundamental intent is eminent domain on this. The message has been sent regardless of whether it passes, but I think it will. And there's another reason why he did it, right? Again, I see from my vantage point, others may not. It's my view and my suspicion that when disclosure comes, probably on a Friday night around 9:30, that's what I would do if I was the president. Give people a weekend to kind of chill, maybe get drunk, right? Then maybe close the stock market down for the next week. Okay. But in any event, Friday night, come Monday noon, a lot of companies around this, all of a sudden are going to be trying to jam patents into the patent office, right? Just get those puppies in there, filing trademarks off and everything else so they can patent that tech that they kind of feel attached to. All right. That's what could very well happen. Not now. You see, once disclosure happens and that starts, a little awkward. If particularly if he gets it in the law, if that law passes with eminent domain, he basically told them, don't even think about patenting this. Don't even think about having rights to this. We own it, and we will decide to what degree our fine high-tech companies will be able to benefit from it, and we will decide how it will be asserted, and money could be made, and everyone wins. But it ain't going to be your call; it's going to be ours. So he achieved that, but he achieved two other things in that moment. Again, we're talking about July 14, 39 days after Crush comes forward. Do you think Chuck Schumer would have gone to the effort to announce eminent domain over non-human technology if there wasn't any non-human technology?
That's a good point.
Just in case there's some
Absolutely
out there. Now, of course not. And so when he does that, he completely confirms
NHI is in the bill 22 times.
Okay, he is now completely backed up Grush in case there's some other fool out there that's thinking, I don't know, they can come up with some old text that he said and cancel him. And so he has completely supported Grush, which of course I'm sure Grush appreciated. And Grush is doing quite well, by the way. He's doing quite fine. All right, but he did something else. Schumer is not on the Intel Committee, but he is, of course, the Senate Majority Leader. He's been quiet for 3 years. And then he comes forward and does that. And so the message he just sent to the world and to the Hill and to the White House as we approach the signing of this very important bill is that I, Chuck Schumer, Majority Leader of the Senate and member of the Gang of Eight, am totally down with my colleagues over at the Intel Committee. Love what those men and women are doing. Right on, sisters and brothers. Keep up the good work. He just accomplished that as well. All right. And so that happens on the 14th. Now, guess what next happens? All right. Is that the House, which has been watching all this for some time and has always had an inferiority complex when it comes to national security, meaning the Senate it dominates there, right? The Senate Intel Committee is the committee. We all know that. And and by the way, the Senate is democratically controlled, and the committee is essentially chaired by a Democrat, though it's basically a co-chair with the Republican Marco Rubio, which is the way it's always been. But there's some people down in the House that kind of feel that they are not being properly appreciated. One of those is Tim Burchett from Tennessee. Fine state. My sister lived there for years, went there many times. Unbelievable, beautiful state. Okay. Tim somehow got wind of what was going on. We don't know how, but I can tell you this. I've spent enough time on the Hill to know that Capitol Hill is one giant cafeteria is really what it is. And everybody goes down in the basements for lunch and dinner, and they hang out, and they just gossip their brains out, right? And so nothing stays secret too much. I mean, yeah, but still, something's going on over here. It gets around. And so, there were multiple briefings on the Hill, went on for 2 years. You had several classified reports that went into certain committees. And the way it is that you're having lunch down there at, I don't know, Subway. And the next thing you know, you're being told about some things. And one way or another, Tim Burchett got the word. Maybe he just has got a giant UFO library in his basement. He's decided, yeah, there's an ET presence here, and I'm not a potted plant, and so I'm jumping into this. And he jumped in with both feet. Before Grush turns up, he's going on News Nation, he's going on Fox News, and he's saying, there's extraterrestrials here. We've got crash vehicles. And not once, he did it for weeks, and he's still doing it. And so he's already way out in front. And by and large, he has every right to do that. And by and large, okay, fine. Tim, cool, no problem. But when Grush comes forward, they started thinking about that. And they thought about it for a while. And then they made the decision, hey, we can have a hearing here, right? Why? Because prior to Grush coming forward, I don't think they could have done it. Because just because you're a subcommittee of a committee in the House, or just a House committee in general, and the Oversight Committee is not exactly the right committee, but the Oversight Subcommittee has that committee has a national subcommittee, has a national security mandate, and so it's appropriate, but it's just a subcommittee. Just because you're a subcommittee and you think you want to have the hearing doesn't mean you're going to have one. Oh, you can try, but you've got to get witnesses to come in. And if they don't want to come in, you don't have a committee. Now, a hearing, you could subpoena them, but subpoenaing, military people to come in on this issue at this time would be a huge mistake. And so they could have had one. But Grush turns up. And why was Grush there? He was a whistleblower trying to regress serious issues, and he wanted his story out. He wanted it out fast. That's why they couldn't get it in the New York Times, the Washington Post, or ABC, NBC, because it was too big a story, and they were not being given enough time to vet it. And so it ended up going out through the debrief in News Nation. No problem. Okay. And so he wanted to move quickly. And so that they
one point there, if his name hadn't gotten leaked, I think they would have had more time.
Well, yeah, maybe. But all we know is that Grush was the one that was determining the time frame, not the government, not Leslie Kean. He wanted it done. They agreed to go and get it done. They got it done at the debrief. Now, so what that means is that the committee is looking at Grush and saying, hey, I'll bet he would testify. And they approached him. And sure enough, he said, yeah, I'll be happy to testify. And once they had Grush, it wasn't difficult, I think, to get Fravor and
Graves.
Graves. Yeah. So now they had a hearing. And not huge, but a decent hearing. 3 former members of the Air Force, all of which were known, particularly Graves and Fravor. And so they had a nice little hearing, and they called it. They put it together in about, I don't know, not many days. And they hold that hearing. And Grush does what, I mean, he'd already was off script. Now he goes even further off script. He now repeats everything he said before to Ross Coulthart under oath to an actual committee of Congress, which really now sends the flag all the way up to the top of the pole, which makes it even harder for Kirkpatrick, makes it even harder for those that are pursuing this process. And so that happens, all right? And in addition, they got a little overexcited, and and some of the members of the committee, including a non-member of that committee, cruised on down to Florida to a military base and kind of went down there and said, hey, we need to see this and we need to see that. And they didn't really understand that you can't really do that. You know, it's like, yeah, you just can't show up at a military base and say, hey, I need to see some stuff. No, even if you're a member of Congress, doesn't work that way. So that bothered them. They tried to get a skiff so that Grush could go in that mode to talk to them, but that wasn't going to happen because that needed DOD approval and they wouldn't get it. So what is the message I'm trying to convey here? Am I mad at that committee for having a hearing? No. Am I upset with Tim Burchett? No. And do I think they were way out of line? Not particularly. The truth embargo is what it is, and they didn't start it. They're trying to end it, okay? But it was off the script. It was not supposed to be that way, and they needed to contain that as best they could. Now, one way to contain it was Chuck Schumer coming forward and backing Grush up, so that was going to be taken off the table. Look, you want to play around with that, fine, but I've just confirmed what he said is true. All right, okay, fine, but something else had to happen. And what happened was this: Turner is the head of the House Intel Committee. He is the House counterpart to Warner, all right? And he's a member of the Gang of 8. And so I'm just going to take a wild guess here and say that Mr. Turner, Mark Warner, possibly Rubio, and maybe a couple of other members of the Gang of 8 went and had coffee down at the subway in the basement of the Senate building or whatever the hell. And they talked about the fact that it would be best if the House didn't hold any more hearings on this. All right, this is not helping. The next hearing needs to be in front of the Senate Intel Committee. That's what we've been preparing for some time. And while we appreciate the fact that the House has important duties and important powers, let us also agree that this issue is of a type that it needs to be handled properly. And so that is why Turner came forward and said there will be no more hearings in the House. Not because he's trying to stop it, not because there's an effort to somehow bring the truth embargo back, but because he's trying to comply with the set of protocols in place. I could be wrong, but I would.
Hold on real quick. If that's true, then why doesn't he come out and state that? Because I'll tell you what, it looks completely different. I mean, you're up there, you're working in DC, you see things that the rest of us cannot see, but for the rest of us on the outside, and trust me, I've hammered him over it because it looks exactly like he's trying to stop disclosure. And if he's just trying to put it in a better place in the Senate with more authority and influence, why doesn't he just say that?
Well, first of all, he's not trying to put it into the Senate. That is the way things have been set up for it to go. He's trying to simply comply with the process that's underway. And the reason he can't just come out and say it in that way, is blunt as you suggest, gets back to the fundamental message that I've been trying to get out for almost 2 years now, is this: what is going on now is difficult and complicated, awkward and risky. All right. Why? Because it's about ending one of the most extraordinary things any government has ever done, frankly, ending a 76-year lie in which the U.S. government has literally denied the existence of something flying over our heads every single day. They have embargoed the most important information in history without having to execute people, without having to declare martial law, using every skill they have within a democratic republic. If this was a dictatorship, it would have been easy. There'd be a whole lot of dead people and everybody would just shut up. But no, they had to do it as a democratic republic. It's remarkable. They pulled it off, but it is now the time to end it. And it is so hard. And so they have, in order to end it, they needed to establish the infrastructure, what I call the scaffolding, to create the stage, like they do with the inauguration of the president every 4 years, that the president could step up on and then tell the people in a very formal way, you're not alone. Mm-hmm. That is what they're doing. But they don't have the luxury of telling you why. They don't have the luxury of saying, hey, look, here's the deal. We've always known about the ET presence. We embargoed it from you, but now we're going to set up all this stuff so the president can confirm it. They can't do that. They have got to somehow do this without spilling the beans, without letting the cat out of the bag. They have got to stay within certain boundaries. And the analogy I use is this. 3 years ago, starting with that, well, really 6 years ago, but 3 years ago, the United States government caught a ball, the football, on the 1 yard line. And their job was to run up the field and score a touchdown. And that touchdown, of course, is disclosure. Spike the ball, president spikes the ball, tells the people that ETs are here. But in order to do this, they're going to have to dodge and juke and run around here and run around there, dive over this person and get to that. But here's the problem. If they step out of bounds 1 inch, the play stops. It's over. You can't step out of bounds, not even once. That's the way football works, and it's the way this works. And so you can't get into abductions. You can't talk about hybrids. You can't come right out and say what Grush said. You've got to keep it so that, one, the politicians will keep the faith, so that the public will not get ahead of themselves, and the journalists won't get out of control. I'm not saying this well, but I'm simply saying that you've got to build that scaffolding without any distractions, and you've got to get it done right. Otherwise, the president's going to walk up on it, the damn thing's going to collapse, and he's going to die. So you've got to stay within the bounds. That means many things, like don't write a letter about Kirkpatrick. Don't write a letter about Grush. It means House, don't hold a hearing for Grush, right? Don't try to get a skiff, right? It also means Turner needs to come out and put the kibosh on any more House hearings without getting into the details. He can't get into the details. He can't come out there and say, look, there's going to be no more House hearings because the hearing where we bring the witnesses forward that are going to set the world's hair on fire needs to be in front of the House Intel Committee. No. And this is happening and has been happening over and over again with respect to statements by Mellon and by Elizondo and by others, right? That people that don't have that vantage point, they're watching this stuff in a limited perspective and going, what? How can you say that? Why didn't you say this? What the hell is going on? I get it, right? And I'm telling you, it ain't easy for them. And believe me, they would like to have gotten this over a lot quicker, right? The first bill was signed in December of 2020, right? Right? Guess what started happening in December of 2020, the beginning of the worst pandemic since 1917. Millions were going to die, massive economic impact. That wasn't on the menu, so they had to weather through that. And by the time things start to settle down, Putin decides to become the next czar and reunite the Soviet Empire, right? That didn't help. Meanwhile, the politics is turning into a three-ring circus that nobody gets at all right? And then you have the Middle East explode. So guess what? It's taken a lot longer than they would have liked, and it made it a lot harder on them. I can be nothing but understanding, all right? We need to respect that. But here's the thing that I really want people to know. In spite of the pandemic, in spite of politics unlike anything a country has ever seen, and we've seen a lot, despite an incredibly dangerous war in the Ukraine, in spite of one of the absolute worst confrontations between the Arab and the Jewish world ever, the disclosure process has continued to move forward every single month, every single year. It just continues to move forward. Why? Because all of this stuff that's happening is awful and terrible, but it's transcended by disclosure. Disclosure transcends it all. It transcends politics, religion, economics. It's the most important issue in the world, period. And that embargo has to end. And where things are right now is actually come down to a very simple situation, okay? It's this simple right now. Everything will be in place as of December 21st in the signing of that bill, which means there is no more barrier whatsoever between preventing a appropriate Senate intel hearing. Gillibrand has already said there would be one. They've interviewed a bunch of witnesses, some of them even more significant than Grush. They've got 15, 20 come up on the Hill tomorrow and blow this thing out of the water. It will take 1 week. 1 week of hearings, morning and afternoon, kind of like the January 6th, only much more fun. 1 week of hearings, and the president can walk out in the East Room and end the embargo like that, and people will go, of course. That's how close we are. But the only way that is going to happen is if, probably in concert, Mark Warner and Marco Rubio call that hearing. Nobody else can call that hearing. The president cannot call a hearing in front of the Senate Intel. I don't even think Schumer can. No, other committee members cannot do it. It can only be called by the chair, probably in concert with the ranking member. If they don't call it, there will be no hearing. And if there is no hearing, there will be no disclosure. And the 2024 election will become even more bizarre and more awful than it was going to be anyway. And so history is literally standing on the shoulders of Mark Shermer and Marco Rubio. And God, I wish I could at least sit down with them and tell them this, but I can't. I have to tell them through your podcast. Absolutely. They must call this hearing. If they do not, we may have a nuclear war before we have that hearing, in which case there will be no hearing. Or we're going to have an election so screwed up that I don't know what the hell is going to happen. And they can fix that by simply ending this embargo or giving the president the opportunity to do so. And so, Marco, make history, guys. Do the right thing. Call the witnesses, hold the hearing, and then let's see if the president properly responds.
Okay. I'm going to give Rob at least another question.
Guess my only...
He wrote down a bunch of notes. So go ahead, Rob.
Well, there was just, I guess, my perspective from the ground floor, it gives the appearance, and I'm not saying this is accurate, that when Kirkpatrick comes out and speaks that there's no evidence of extraterrestrials and no evidence of the crash retrieval program, that's not under oath, in complete opposition to what David Grush's sworn testimony were, along with the other 40 that worked in or did work within this crash retrieval program. Senators and others that would be influenced are watching that, and if they're hearing this out of Arrow, that there's nothing there, and they're trying to discount David's testimony and the others, and they haven't been briefed on this in skiffs and whatever, that if they're trying to decide whether to engage with this and there's there, that's not productive to that process. And perhaps, that's what some of us are thinking. And, this is, it's only from our vantage point that perhaps they're trying to force disclosure from happening by trying to discount it and maybe drag it out to the next election. They can get somebody else in office that would help them suppress it and going back down the road as usual and not disclose. So that was where I was coming from with that aspect, stating that he had tried to contact David and then, that was not true. That's not helping disclosure by any means. And it looks intentional to try and stop it, at least from that. And I understand that the government and the Pentagon aren't monoliths. So there's different factions with different goals. So that was my only point with that.
I have to disagree with you again. All right. Here is what actually happened. First of all, Kirkpatrick, of course, had a terrible job, difficult job. He was put in charge of Arrow, which was not supposed to do anything. And that's one of the reasons they didn't give it any money. Remember, there was all that kerfuffle about the fact that why he isn't getting any money. Well, it was really didn't need any money. It's nothing to do except exist. It's a Potemkin village. I get that. That doesn't mean there's some things they're not doing. They're setting up and they're preparing, but whatever. It's simply basically just exist. I don't know if he knew that when he signed on, but if he didn't, then I'm sure he became very upset when he kind of realized what his role was. So he could not. Sean Kirkpatrick was not the man who was going to end the truth embargo. He couldn't do that. He wasn't going to be able to do that, and he wouldn't even try. It wasn't his job. All right. He was basically holding the fort. And so, but yet he was going to have to answer questions. I mean, he couldn't simply hide out. And so when he makes a statement like Arrow does not have any evidence for extraterrestrial presence, what he's saying is that within Arrow, formally within the structure, there is not evidence for that. That doesn't mean it isn't elsewhere in the government. It just doesn't happen to be in my office right now. That's about the best he can do, and that's what he did.
Exactly.
Okay. And then the second thing, but guess what? What's just recently happened? And I'm happy for him. Sean Kirkpatrick is finally, things are approaching the end, which he knows. The bill will be passed soon. I happen to believe they will hold the hearings in the Senate. I just want to scream and yell about it in case there's any ambivalence about it. But he's stepping down. Okay. And so he's given several interviews in the stepping down process, and he will be replaced next year. Of course he will be. Right. Because this is the guy that's had to catch arrows and spears for almost a solid year. He's had to sit there and take all kinds of grief and be in an impossible position. But when disclosure takes place, it makes a lot of sense that Sean needs to move on, but we got a great job for him. He's going to be well taken care of, I assure you. He will be his appreciation for what he did will come later, and we will start the post-disclosure world with a fresh head of Arrow, when Arrow is going to get tons of money to really work hard, because it's going to be a major factor in the post-disclosure world. And this all leads up to the point that I'm about to make. Sean is now almost free. Now, once he goes to the new job, he's not going to be saying anything at all. But he does have a little bit of time to speak. And a couple of things he said are worth checking out on. But he still can't be the guy that says there's an ET presence. But here is what he said in a couple of interviews. He said this: one, it would be a lot better if this phenomenon is alien, because if it's actually human, meaning other countries, that is a significant threat to the United States. Now let's parse that out. Okay. One, he's basically saying if it's not alien, it's a threat. But if it is alien, well, I guess it's not a threat, is it? Plus, the government, our government, on a number of occasions, I say our government, various people operating within either the UAP task force or whatever the hell, has said repeatedly, it's not our tech. And our adversaries don't have that tech. We have the best tech. And so if it's not our tech and it's not our adversaries' tech, then it's alien tech. And he just basically confirmed that. He basically said, of course, it's non-human, but I can't specifically say that. And that's what he's talking about on the way out the door. All right. Again, without the perspective I have, trying to understand what is going based upon a letter from this person or a statement from that person is absolutely impossible. This is a very complex process underway that has three fundamental purposes. One, to set the stage, to prepare for the United States president in a very nonpartisan way, and with a public absolutely convinced that what he's about to say is true before he even says it. And that's what the hearings will accomplish, to be able to come forward and end the truth embargo. That is the first reason all this is happening. The second reason this is happening is that imagine this scenario in which our intelligence community learns that Xi Jinping is going to, within 10 days, go in front of the Communist Party, the Chinese Communists, forget the name of that massive structure that they have, and confirm the extraterrestrial presence. confirmed that the Chinese government has got a number of vehicles, has been doing reverse engineering. There's an ET presence, and I'm just telling the world. And they're running around with their hair on fire. Oh my God, we can't have that. We can't have that. We can't have that. And they go to the president and they say, you've got to disclose. You can't let Xi get ahead of you. And the president says, well, I guess I do. And so he comes out in the East Room and suddenly says to the world, there's an extraterrestrial presence. Okay, fine. We beat Xi, but guess what? There's no legislation. There's no rules, nothing talking about how the process of bringing material forward, witness protection or anything like that. There's no arrow. There's been no group set up at NASA. There's nothing. There's no infrastructure whatsoever to deal with what's going to come the next day when 10,000 reporters turn up in every briefing room in every government entity in this country. Other nations are putting their hands up going, what the hell is going on? Everybody wants information, and there's nothing in place to deal with it. That is the second reason why they're going through all of this, because the way this is going to unfold, the day after disclosure, when all this happens, the United States, ready to go. But there's a third reason, and I appreciate it, and I've talked about it. The U.S. government has done some awful things in my lifetime, terrible things. We want to think that we are the most righteous in the world. We want to think that we're nothing but good. We want to think that we don't do the awful things that we point out in other countries, but the fact is we do. On the other hand, we have probably done enough good things, and our system provides the basis for even more good things, that I'm not prepared to say that the United States should be wiped off the face of the earth. I just think it needs to be seriously fixed. All right. So it is, difficult. And the truth embargo is an example of that. It's a pretty
truth embargo.
It did. And I'll give you the worst, the ultimate example. This would be the worst case example of what they've just done since 1946. And to make a point, here is the hypothetical. In 1940, say in the late 1940s, because of research being done through World War II in order to deal with this and that and biological weapons, we stumble across an unbelievable biotechnology that virtually eliminates cancer, kills any cancer, absolutely kills any cancer. Whatever you got kills it in like about a week, and you're fine. And they're going, one of the greatest inventions of all time. This is unbelievable. Pulitzer Nobel Prizes are going to rain from the sky. And then the military intelligence guys come in, and the government finance guys come in, and they sit down with you and they say, here's a problem. If we announce this, if we let this technology out, it's going to extend lifetimes by 20, 30 years. It's going to destroy the Social Security system, right? There's no way our safety nets can hold this, right? So it's in the interest of national security that we keep this technology private and classified until such time as we can deal with a population living to be 110. And they go along, okay, fine. And so for the next 75 years, that cancer curing technology is embargoed. And then the day comes when the embargo is going to end, and they're going to have to go in front of the American people and say, we've had a cure for all cancers for 75 years, and we kept it secret for national security reasons, but we are going to let you know about it now. Can you get a sense of the public relations problem they're facing there? Can you just imagine what's going to happen after that? Okay. You know how angry people are going to be? That's the worst case scenario of what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
75 years they've lied about this. 75 years they've kept technology that might be very helpful to us secreted, only available for weaponization and so forth. And they're now going to have to confirm all of that, if not day one, within a short amount of time. And so they have a massive public relations problem. And everybody's going to want to be nasty and awful and so forth. And naturally, nobody wants that. People don't want to be hated. They don't want to be, castigated. They want to be loved. We all want to be loved. Okay, which is why, and not too many people know this, but I knew, in the early 1990s, the Pentagon put out a multi-million-dollar contract to the most powerful public relations firm in Washington, D.C., And the task that they were paying this money for was for that firm to run and develop and try to describe the best scenarios by which the government could end up ending the truth embargo. Right? In other words, how can we go about this in the most optimal way, public relations wise, and also to do a deep dive and analysis of how they think the post-disclosure world will go. All right, other ways it could go, so that we can anticipate that. Perfectly reasonable contract. It took years, and I think in the late 90s, that public relations firm delivered that contract to the Pentagon, or delivered that information. So the Pentagon's been sitting on a substantially gamed out scenario on this, which they've had years to further develop if they wanted to, and they've got supercomputers running other supercomputers. And so do you think that the Pentagon and our military intelligence community hasn't gamed out this backwards, forwards, upside and downside? Of course they have. They're not surprised by this. And so they have a good idea of how the post-disclosure world, and they have a good idea how best to end the truth embargo. And I assure you, they're going to end it with the maximum public relations benefit. And so that is the third reason they're doing this, so that when they finally have to answer the brutally tough questions, which will come in week one, okay, the people that are hearing those answers are going to be a little more generous, meaning, man, I can't believe you said that, but you're doing the right thing now. You've got the laws, you've got the structures, you're doing investigations, you're going to bring the truth out. Let's let bygones be bygones. Let's move forward together. Okay, that's the third reason why they're doing this and why it's being done that way. Go ahead.
Here's a question that people are going to have, and you've laid out a scenario of how this is being controlled. That there was a plan put in place, and it's kind of been messed up along the way, but they're still trying to keep it from being out of bounds. But the question that a lot of people are going to ask is, who's making the decision? Who created this plan, and who's in control of it ultimately?
Again, it is human nature to try to simplify things so that they can understand things. I mean, this is what science is all about. Take unbelievably complicated things, studying for years and years, and get it down to an understandable equation. I get that. This is naturally human nature. The fact is that the world is way more complicated than our ability to assess it. Of course, with AI, pretty soon, we can do all that. And so, 5 years from now, we'd be like, of course, almost anybody could figure out whatever's going on. They just pull up their friggin' AI, but not now. And so the idea that a person could actually somehow go out and learn how all of this is unfolding and how it's been going on for 70 years and understand it is ludicrous. I'm sorry. It isn't that simple, but they want it to be simple. And so there needs to be a central controlling entity. There needs to be a clearly defined motivation. It needs to be, and cui bono, my God, it's always going to follow the money. And all of these things are designed to make it easier for them to understand, but don't necessarily properly describe what's going on or even come close to describing it. It's just
more like an octopus than a single entity in itself. It's multiple things working together.
Octopus doesn't describe it. You're talking about history at a massive level involving hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, thousands of agencies and everything else. And so at the beginning, when the decision at one point at the very beginning, it's like a human body starts out with an egg, and whatever. It's real simple, right? Starts out a couple of cells, pretty obvious, easy to understand. But then try to understand what you got when it finally gets born. Oh my God, it's beyond comprehension. Okay, so here's the deal. At the beginning, it's real simple. The Army Air Force has a crash vehicle and dead non-humans. Truman knows about it. Some people on the base know about it. A press release is put out. Awkwardly, right? A little problem there, but if they act quickly, it's 1947. There's no internet. Hell, there's nothing really. We can probably contain it. And so a decision is made at the presidential level to sit on it for a while, at least for a while. It's an easy decision. They contact Ramey. Ramey brings in Marcel takes the wreckage that he brings, sticks that somewhere else, brings out some tinfoil from the freezer, holds it up, says it's a weather balloon, and quelches the story. That's pretty simple. Nothing complicated there. Nothing much more than that. That's it. Who Truman conferred with before the Ramey decision, we don't know. It couldn't have been a lot of people because the decision was made the same day that the press release came out, right? And so basic. And now you go forward. And as you move forward in time, with the government now fully aware that this is real, so now the government has got to set up programs to start really tracking this stuff. They know it's non-human. They got to track it. And they've got X amount of technology. And so they're tracking, and they're trying to learn. They're having to develop departments and people to deal with it. They set up a group called MJ12. I believe that group did happen, of the appropriate people, and start to just try to get their arms around this thing that possibly they didn't even know about till 47. Might have had a hint prior to that. They certainly knew about the Foo Fighters, but what are they going to do about that? They're fighting a war, right? And so it's like they're not going to set up a Foo Fighter department. They got to beat the Nazis first and then deal with it. But before they could even deal with the Foo Fighters, you got not Roswell. And so they passed the National Security Act of 47 to deal with the Soviet threat and all the intelligence needs that is going to require. And conveniently, that act would also make it easier to address the ET issue, which they knew they were going to have to classify. And so the engagement of the issue moves forward in time and traveling in parallel with the nuclear arms race, all the geopolitical threats in the world, right? And the growth of both intelligence services as well as the military technology and what have you. And it slowly becomes what we now call the military intelligence complex, involving hundreds of thousands of people. Okay. And so as that history is unfolding, the ET issue and its management is in there somewhere, along with the management of the nuclear submarine program and the SAC bases and our diplomacy with other nations and everything else. It's all just in there, and it's being managed in various ways. We can assume that the way they managed the ET issue, which was fully classified, was very similar to the way they manage all classified stuff, right? Certain structures, certain classification systems, and so forth, certain access and all that, okay? The chances are it was being run by some guy named Klaus or something in Europe are zero. The chances it's being run by an Illuminati group in a mountain somewhere is zero. It's being managed within an evolving complex that represents the development of the military intelligence complex as well as the geopolitics of the 20th century. And that would take 15 or 20 years of study to even get your arms around. And so people don't want to simplify it down to something like that and then go on the internet with their adamant assertions. What can I say? I get it.
It wasn't meant as an argument. It was just meant that, people are just going to want to know the origin. But I think I kind of somewhat figure out what you're saying, because you said it's at different points of time we could have been at disclosure if certain things had gone certain way.
Sure.
And so it's evolving and changing, and we're heading towards something, but we're not 100% sure if we're going to get it, because like you said, if this hearing doesn't happen, we're not going to get it. But I really wanted to lead into something as we close out this podcast, because I think it kind of fits with, and you'll still have time at the end. It fits with everything you've been saying, Steve. I want to kind of give you some of the sentiments that I'm hearing from prominent people. A lot of it's coming through X and posts like that, but I want to give you the sentiment that I'm hearing from people, and then I want your opinion on it. And I've got a quick clip I'm going to play as well. But the first one is from Lou Elizondo, and it's just one of the two quotes I have from him. This wasn't too long ago, maybe a month or two ago, somewhere in there. He put down, simply put, yes, and I believe he's addressing the very topic you're talking, disclosure.
Right.
He says, but not in the way that many think or even want. But once we are there, the view will be amazing. He says, keep the faith. Much, much more is coming. It is becoming increasingly difficult by the gatekeepers to hold back the flood. It's coming, and soon. Remember, it's a process, not an event. In the meantime, stay tuned. And then the next quote he put out a little bit after that, he says, howdy, folks. Just a quick update for you to consider. Please know that ongoing efforts are underway that will reveal themselves. This may be exactly what you're talking about by early to mid 2024. At the risk of haters trying to sabotage our effort, I can't be precise at this time, but if you have learned anything over the last 5 years, I never make empty promises. Trust me, this will be worth it. Special thanks to Chris Mellon and Jay Stratton. And then I want to read a few more, and then we'll give you your chance to respond. Richard Butt said November will be a very good month for the topic. UFO Twitter will have plenty to talk about. Still kind of waiting to figure out what that is. And then a friend of mine, I'm not going to use his name, he says, this was addressed to me. He says, you're going to have a much more significant role in this, especially after the United States government admits NHI exists next year. And so they're going to admit it possibly next year. Christians will need guidance of how to reconcile that this in no way negates the existence of God. And I didn't know if you knew it or not, Steve, but I'm a pastor, and so that's why that was addressed to me in that way. Not your average pastor, I'd have to say. Not too many of them are on X. And then UAP Jedi is a friend of mine. He says UAP confirmation in 2024. That's a question. He says multiple sources have informed Liberation Times that they anticipate some form of confirmation, which is the word you used earlier, regarding programs linked to crafts of unknown or non-human origins in 2024, which lack any mundane explanation. And then he says this, he says, I know that some of you at least won't agree, but after nearly 50 odd years of following, being interested, researching, and advocating for UAP disclosure, and after all the other false starts, this time it feels different. This time it feels real. And I really got the sense of that's what you're saying as well. Larry Gert, who's another friend of mine, he was responding to Jedi's post. He says, I have been in this field for about as long as you, and I concur. It has never felt like this in the past. In fact, I was pretty sure it was going to happen a few months ago. And even though it's been one hell of a roller coaster ride, I agree with you that the stage has been set. And of course, he has a little bit different view here, both by ET themselves and by the government. And then here's one that's related to David Grush, and it comes from UAP James. He says David Grush was featured in an article on At Country Highway in October by writer Walter Kern on his meeting with Grush. And then he says this, he assured me, talking about Grush, in the next year, a big UFO reveal will be accelerated in a way that the whole world will find astonishing. And then I have one more clip, Steve, and then you're going to come in and give us your perspective.
I hope it's not me as a young man, for God's sakes.
Oh,
go for it.
We've all lost hair, okay, Steve? Mine is like a halo that fell over the back of my head. I look like a monk, I guess, right there. But no, I just thought that was you on fire. It was meant to be flattering. So I apologize if it didn't hit you that way. But anyway,
no,
I'll play this.
I've gotten used to looking old, and all of a sudden I'm going, oh, I was young once. Oh, God. All right, go ahead. Let's go. Go ahead. Send it up.
All right, here's the clip.
Two main groups. There's the group that wants disclosure, and there's the group that doesn't. It's very simple. We'll break it down like that. What he was telling me is that for some reason, we've now reached a point where there's a lot of people that were against disclosure that have now re-examined the issue and very recently have decided to kind of turn over a new leaf and say, you know what? Yeah, you're right. It's time. We can't keep doing this. We can't keep fighting against it. It's inevitable. That's the sense that he's getting from what he knows about the situation, and that's my read on it as well. And I guess the other point that Sean brought up that's really fascinating is that, again, there's this mention of urgency, and that all of the different things that you're seeing happening right now, whether it be different movies, media, what the news is covering, like, you can see a drop off in the stigma. There's a race against time going on here to disclose. And we keep hearing about that over and over and over. And some of the people that are speaking about it are very credible. They're not like these weird, basement wackos that hide their face and, use, weird voiceovers on their videos. Like, these are people that we all know, like the Danny Sheehans of the world, Ross Coultharts, like all of these different people have mentioned it. Chris Sharp, we're going to be having him on the show at some point soon. He has that sense based on what he knows, the people he's talking to. that there is an urgency to get this information out and to acclimate the public because ... And that's the big question.
All right, Steve, I'm going to give you the last word before I close out the session. So kind of give us your perspective, because it seems like a lot of it intertwines with what you were saying.
Sure. First of all, don't you love the production values on those two podcasts like that, man? Great cameras. I love that stuff. Believe me,
Oh, yeah.
Those who are clinging to the truth embargo, hoping that the social media and the Twitter world would not take it down, and then comes along, the podcast revolution comes along, and they just throw their hands up. That's it. We give up. We can't deal with this. No, I agree with all of that. Absolutely. Everybody is sensing this, and they're expressing it. I believe those comments by Lou Elizondo, which I agree with, but I think those were made before the Middle East blew up again. So again, history is what it is, and
it probably was. It probably was.
Make it easy. So yeah, I totally agree. 2024, but here is, and I'm glad I had this opportunity here. Here is the equation as I see it. 2024 is the year, but it has to be early. It's got to be in January, February. And you may say, well, why? Why not? Here is why. First of all, these are the reasons. And I hope people will listen to this very carefully, because this is really where it comes down to the nitty gritty, and where it comes down to you and your life. All right. One, we have never been closer to nuclear war than we are now. I mean, this is pretty much agreed. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists has got us at 90 seconds. The defconlevel.com, which is a website run by former high-level intelligence people as a service to the world, where they're keeping track of the DEFCON levels and all the commands around the world, which are not publicly put forward by our government. They don't put it out, but they have a pretty good idea what they are, and they put it out. And they've had the Europe at DEFCON 2 for the entire 16 months. And we've been at DEFCON 3 several times in the United States. DEFCON 1 is nuclear war. So DEFCON 2 is just before nuclear war. And that's been Europe for 18 months. And I haven't checked it since, the Middle East blew up, but I have a feeling that a couple of other commands have gone on DEFCON 2. Now, to be sure, let me clarify. What DEFCON 1 means is that nuclear war is underway. And what does that mean? If one nuclear shell, tactical nuke, is fired from one country to another, right? Not in the same country, that's not war, that's an accident. So if either side in the Ukraine war were to launch a nuclear shell into the other side, that is a nuclear war, and they are in DEFCON 1. Then the question is whether that nuclear war remains regional or whether it spreads into a global nuclear holocaust, which would be basically DEFCON 1 on steroids, and it's game over, bye-bye, sayonara, it's been great, we have some party gifts for you, all right? And so we have never been closer to nuclear war than we are. And a case has been made over and over and over again by me and others, but I certainly probably know. Again, I need to write books and do more than I do, and I needed to get a documentary done. We almost did the about this, but the pandemic blew it up. The point is that there's a simple equation going on here, as far as I'm concerned. Nuclear war is inevitable. The one thing that could possibly turn us away from that and actually bring about the reforms necessary to eliminate it is disclosure. Nothing else can do that. Nothing. No way. Disclosure could open the door to finally getting that nuke issue solved. Not all the problems of the world, but that. And so disclosure has got to happen before we have the nuclear war, and we could have one tomorrow. So that's one reason. Right there. Second reason. The political situation in the United States is a mess. I mean, it's really a mess. I mean, there have been worse political situations in other countries, but from the standpoint of our history, it's pretty bad. And there was a time when it was also a mess. There was a time during the 1800s, certainly before and after the Civil War. Things were pretty awful, I get that. But the world was a lot less dangerous place back then. And the population was a lot smaller. Right now, we cannot afford the luxury of this kind of political chaos and collapse of trust in government and so forth. Stakes are too high. And so we have an election about to start. It really hasn't started yet. Been a couple of campaigns, but it didn't start until the primary. So we still got a little time. And one of two things are going to happen here. Rubio and Warner are going to call for a hearing in January after the bill is passed. They're going to bring in about 12 or 13 witnesses. Those witnesses are going to be unbelievable. Those hearings will be watched by hundreds of millions of people. There will be classified report, but what's in publicly stated in public is going to be more than enough. And after 1 week of those, the president could confirm the extraterrestrial presence disclosure. Late January, early February. Nope. And what does that mean? It means this. As the 2024 election really gets underway, where 2,000 candidates, balloted candidates at least, are going to be running for 435 House seats, 33 Senate seats, 25 governors, right? So those are pretty substantial offices, as well as a lot of state senates and so forth. 2,000 candidates are going to be campaigning in the post-disclosure world. They will have a bit of time, weeks easily, maybe a bit more, to start reading those books back there. But most of them aren't going to probably read those books. But what they can do is go online, go to YouTube, put UFO in the search box, and up will come enough documentaries, keep them busy for months. They will have time to educate themselves to the basics of this issue and its history, so that as they go out to campaign to become the next senator, the next governor, the next representative, they're actually going to be able to answer questions and some intelligence, nonpartisan questions, by the way, which means they're actually going to be able to act like normal human beings and not raving lunatics, and be able to say what they think about it. What do they think about the presence of ETs? In other words, the post-disclosure reality of truth will be completely inculcated into the election, which is going to elect a whole new government in 2025. Or that's what will happen. That's a good thing. That's a wonderful thing. Or they don't hold these hearings and they don't get disclosure, and this election begins, which has the hallmarks of being one of the most bizarre, ridiculous, insane elections the government has ever seen. I'm not going to go into the details, but you don't have to watch too much news to know that it's going to be off the charts. It's going to be awful. And it's going to go on. And the whole time, all that awfulness is happening, hanging above every debate, every interview, every candidate, is going to be the statements now confirmed by David Grush that the United States has non-human craft, multiple, and non-human bodies. And these candidates aren't going to know jack about it. There's not going to be any confirmation. And so what are they going to say? They're going to mumble and fumble and look like idiots. They're not going to be able to give positions. They're not going to have any thoughts on it. And so that whole thing will just make what will be an awful election even more awful. That is in the hands of the Senate right now, right? We can have a government in 2025 in where at least we know what the position of all of these now elected individuals have with respect to the most important issue in the world, the presence of extraterrestrials, ongoing presence of extraterrestrials. Or we can have an insane election where nobody knows what the hell they're talking about, and who knows what they think about it, and now they're running the government in 2025, and maybe disclosure happens then. These are some pretty damn good reasons to get it done now.
Yeah.
I'd love to be able to get that message out to a larger audience if somebody would put me on a show with a larger audience, but they won't do it. But I'll work on it. I'll get there. It's that simple, right? And I can't say it enough, folks. You've been living with the nuclear threat every minute of your life unless you're older than the age of 77. You've come to normalize it. You've come to make it just part of your life. It could happen. It may not happen. All right. Big mistake. It's not normal. It will never be normal. We have got to take action, or we're going to have that nuclear war. And by the way, there was an article just came out a couple of days ago. Not an accident. And it was a wonderful article about a movie back in 1980. I think it was 85. One of the most controversial movies ever made. It took a year or more just to get agreement among certain authorities that it could be shown at all. There was fear that it would cause people to really lose it, get incredibly distressed and so forth. I mean, they were extremely concerned about this movie. The movie was called The Day After. Its lead star was, oh God, his name escapes me in my mind. I've got COVID fog. I had COVID about a month ago. Jason Robards. And the movie was in a time of less special effects, but overall they did a really good job. And the movie is about, and they don't say how it started, but a nuclear war begins and missiles come in Kansas City to take out certain ICBM sites. It was filmed near the University of Kansas at Lawrence. And it shows the aftermath of a nuclear war. It's called The Day After. And it is awful. Watch that movie. Watch that movie to be reminded that we have been living on the edge of that our entire life. And if we don't do something about it, that is exactly what's going to happen. And we will have earned it because we have had years and years and years to deal with this issue. But the nature of humans and the kinds of leaders that we put in power, many of which are either insane, mentally ill, hypochondriacs, hyper narcissists, or just pure evil. We keep putting those kinds of people in power, and the threat of nuclear war, therefore, is still extant. And by the way, there was an article in the Washington Post yesterday about the new nuclear arms race. So, folks, it is time to get serious here. Nuclear war or disclosure, the paradigm clock at midnight or the doomsday clock at midnight, truth or lies. We're up to our ass in lies. A little truth would go a long way right now. And the biggest truth of all time sits on the shoulders of Mark Warner and Marco Rubio. Call that hearing, bring those witnesses in, and set the president up to disclose. I'd like to stop right there because that's a good finish. It's always good
All right.
to go
Well, let's just
finish.
close this out real quick. The other one I was going to mention, the beach. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
On the
same
beach.
thing.
Sure.
Yeah, that one was it affected me so bad because it was like the mom and the dad and the little girl, and they all took these pills because the radiation was coming. The rest of the world was completely gone. And so very valid points. I want to go ahead and advocate for something that Steve has said, and that is we need to get a hold of our senators, Mark Warner and Marco Rubio, and everyone who's watching this. Not only have you send letters, but make sure you get this out to all of your family
Not
and
letters.
friends. And
not letters. Not letters. Here's how to do it. Don't call, don't email, don't letter. Well, you can, right? But it's if you want to get their attention, find their Twitter account. I think they have them, and tweet them. Now, what I mean by that is go at Senator Warner, whatever. We want these hearings. You're doing a great job. Thank you. In fact, do it to all the members of the Intel Committee. And most of them have Twitter accounts. That goes up on their feed. And they have staff that follow their feed. And they will pick up on that and pass it on. You can email them, though. Those emails tend to go through a system. Calling, yeah, you're not going to get through. And if a lot of people call, it disrupts them. And so if one or two call, it's not a big deal, but we would like them to get a strong message. Well, the way to get a bulk message in is by Twitter. If they have Twitter accounts, and I think they do, they don't have DMs. Almost none of them have DMs. You can imagine why. But as you know, the way Twitter works, and I call it Twitter, it's always going to be Twitter to me, folks. It's never going to be X. So sorry. The point is you go at Senator Warner, Senator, please, we need hearings on this subject right away. At Senator Rubio, whatever the hell their handle is, and Gillibrand and Reed. Go look up the entire, it's not a lot, about 17. Go look up and Twitter every single one of them. Tweet every single one that has a Twitter account and fill their feed up with these messages. It's a very gentle, non-intrusive way to get the message across. You're paying attention. Now, one last thing. Maybe the next time I'm on, we'll talk about this. But I invite all of the viewers to go to this website, Hollywood Disclosure Alliance.org. Hollywood Disclosure Alliance.org. It is still in development.
Let's just have you go ahead and cover that because I did skip over it. You covered the rest of the stuff, but yeah, I did. That was one of my plans was to have you cover that because it's new. Most people don't know about it. What is the purpose for it? What are you hoping to accomplish through it? If
Sure.
you want to go ahead and address that for a few
I mean,
minutes.
you could split this up into 2 shows and just hold it,
All right.
and not do it all at
We
once.
can come back on
Okay.
that. We can come back on that.
Okay, the latest thing that I've been able to contribute to the process is pretty cool. I spent 2.5 years in Hollywood and LA trying to get things done. They all got screwed by the strike but whatever. But I met a lot of good people. I made a lot of contacts. I wish I had been and done this many years ago, because Hollywood's an amazing place. The film industry is amazing. I think I would have had a great time, but that's not the way my life went. But the point is that I'm sort of learning the ropes. In any event, I met a gentleman who is a longtime Hollywood publicist. His name is Dan Harari. We met at an Italian deli and immediately came up with a deal. That's where deals are done, in delis in Hollywood. That's the way it works. Okay. And what we came up with was the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. It is modeled after the Environmental Media Association, EMA, Environmental Media Association. Check it out. Formed in the 1990s and started off with a bang and a ton of money. The $1 million awards dinner. It was backed and formed by Norman Lear and his wife. Norman Lear, of course, is a legend, one of the gods of television, still alive at 101. This association was created as a networking interface between the entire entertainment industry and the entire environmental activist movement. Okay, so that to the extent possible, the entertainment industry and all of its power to create content would be used and to create messages that would be helpful to the world and to the environment. It wasn't a censorship thing. It wasn't a control thing. It was simply, look, here are what the activists are. Here they are. And the activists, here are the people in Hollywood that actually care about the environment. We're going to make it easier for you to connect with each other and do good things. That's what it was about. Still exists. It's got all kinds of A-list people involved, always have. Big deal, 30 years. Well, it turns out that Dan Harari was the publicist for the EMA when it came out 30 years ago. And now he's into the ET issue because guess what? He's had his own experience, right? In fact, most of the people that get in usually have had an experience, right? And so he is on fire about this. And he said, we're going to create the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. And I said, oh, yes, we are. And so it is up. It is in a development stages. The website is still in development, but it is formally underway. We launched it on November the 1st at a meeting at one of the most famous restaurants in Hollywood called Musso and Frank. It is strictly a nonprofit networking organization designed to facilitate connections between all of the professionals in the entertainment industry, film, television, and movies, directors, producers, writers, actors, camera people, you name it, everybody in the professional industry of content creation, and all of those citizens, science, researcher, activists, journalists, and documentarians who have been pursuing this issue in the shadow of the truth embargo, out of their own pocket, going bankrupt, going nuts, having to do all of their work in the face of ridicule from skeptics and idiots and skeptibunkers and other fools, plus under a situation where the government says everything you're doing is a waste of time because there are no ETs, to facilitate the ability for them to network together to create the content that will help educate 8 billion people in the post-disclosure era, which I think is about to break. And to some degree, it may help in terms of the last days of the truth embargo, because there are some projects already in the works. All right. And so the structure of it is quite ingenious, I think. First of all, it is absolutely non-commercial. It is nonprofit. It will make no money, charge no fees, charge no subscriptions. It will only operate on the basis of funding, support, donations from people who will, of course, get a tax deduction. We are already nonprofit under the California law. We will soon have our 501c3 status. All right. And so the structure is this. We will have a large board, which will grow. Currently, it's 20. It may end up being 25, 30. It's a working board, limited, that will meet a couple times a year to vote on certain things. The HDA will be run by an executive committee, however, an executive board made up of Dan Harari as chairman, myself as executive director, Paul Hynek is chief financial officer. Jeff Stein, a longtime professional in the industry, as vice president for development. And Anjali Harari is the secretary. Okay, and so that is the board. Their principal function is to be brand ambassadors to the world. These are people of substance and career accomplishments, and so we want them to represent us to the world and tell people, hey, you need to join in, you need to be part of this, and that will be one of the things they do. Underneath them will be the founding members. There are currently 60. We expect to have 200 in a few months. What are founding members? These are individuals who have time and grade in the entertainment industry as professionals of one type or another, or people who have time and grade in the UAP ET disclosure world, that citizen science research world that I've referred to, my world, all right, and have been brought in as founding members. They are basically just endorsees, in a sense. By having their name and bio up there, they are saying, I'm endorsing this project. It is worthy. However, they are the core network that we're building up. What do I mean? All right. And so when you go to the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, if you're a member of the film industry, in the film industry section, founding member section, you're seeing the names and bios of, and not, we don't put up any contact information of people in the industry who are saying publicly, I'm into this issue. I'm down with this issue. I support this. I know there's ETs here, whatever. And you're seeing who they are. And you're going, hey, I want to do a project on this. That person's already into it. They're a producer. Let me call them. So we're networking literally people in the industry in a sense. On the other side, of course, we have the UAP ET people. And that's where the network gets very interesting, because in that sense, the UAP people are able to look at the founding member side on the, and know these people are into the issue. If I go and approach them, they might help me make a doc. They might help me get a streaming series, as opposed to knocking on doors and being told, we don't want any part of that. They know exactly who to go to, all right? And vice versa. If you're going to make a series or content, you know that there's some credible people that are part of the founding members of this organization that maybe you should approach them, all right? And in general, the rest of the world can go there. They don't have to be a member, and they can say, ooh, that person in the film industry is into this issue. Let me see if I can get in touch with them. Okay, that's somebody I want to meet. Or this is, so you don't have to be a member of the HDA to benefit from its networking mission, right? Okay, obviously the bigger the network, the more that goes on. And so what will happen is these people will get together, they will make deals, they will make streaming series, they will make lots of money. God bless them. I want them to. They need to, because they need to have money if they're going to create great content in the post-disclosure world. None of that has to do with the HDA. We don't make any money. Not at all. They will do it. We help them get together, create content, make money, and fund their lives and their work. All right? That is basically the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. There's one more, there's two more levels. Underneath the founding members are the supporting members. These are people that have donated even $1 to the HDA, and they will be listed alphabetically, just their name, unless they say no. Anyone that donates 1,000 or more, they get highlighted. Their name will be highlighted. And so that's another way to sort of network. People will see a name and go, wow, you supported that. Let me call you up. And then underneath that is the subscribers. Anybody can subscribe. Anybody in the world. All they do is provide their email address, and they will get occasional postings from the HDA. That is what the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance is. It's being received very, very well. The big guns in the industry haven't made a move on it yet, because they are people that want to see it develop. They want to see it substantive. They want to get confident that this is the real deal. But I have a hunch pretty soon some big names are going to turn up on our board and in our founding members. As far as the UAP world, my God, I could put 300 people up tomorrow that deserve to be founding members, but I'm not able to do that yet, because it's important we keep a symmetry between the two sides. I can't have 30 film industry or entertainment industry founding members and 200 UAP members. We've got to keep some balance. But as the film industry founding member number grows, we will start bringing in more UAP numbers. That is the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. I invite people to check it out. It is basically an activist effort, but it is really as I say, disclosure is practically here. It is really about the post-disclosure world, which I should mention, okay, is like all of this effort to get disclosure has been difficult and complex and hard and rewarding in some ways, but it will pale in comparison to what comes after. The post-disclosure world is going to be unlike anything you or I have ever seen. Things will be going on and happening at warp speed. Things will be developing and changing, and all kinds of developments and projects and think tanks will emerge. Like Danny Sheehan's already got his think tank up and going. New Paradigm Institute, Paradigm Research Group will be converted to a think tank in about 45 days and go fully nonprofit. Gary Nolan's already setting up a think tank technology deal called Soul. It's got some heavy duty hitters. I'm sure that the Heritage Institute and the Cato Institute and the Center for American Progress are already thinking about setting up their own post-disclosure extraterrestrial divisions within their think tanks. It is going to be the golden age of reform, possibly technology, and other things. And every year or month that I have alive in that time is going to be a gift. The envy I have for your average Gen Z or millennial who will live most of their life in the post-disclosure world. It is going to be unbelievable. And the opportunities to create, to think, to do will be unlimited. It's just hard to describe it. That is going to be even more engaging than the disclosure movement, but far more rewarding, far more enjoyable. That's what's coming. And the only thing standing between us and that is the confirmation from the President of the United States. And the only thing standing between us and that confirmation is a hearing in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee.
So make sure you get on your Twitter account, get that at Warner or at Rubio. I'm pretty sure that's what it will look like.
At Reed, at Gillibrand, whatever the hell their handles are.
Exactly. Get them all. You said 17 members, you think?
I think there's 17 members of the Intel Committee, maybe 18, 16, something like that. Yeah.
That would be on Google. You can Google that out and figure out who it is. Steve, I just want to tell you how honored I am that you came and you were on the show with us. And I would definitely like to collaborate with you on another one. I mean, if you wanted to go more in detail with this
Anytime.
Hollywood
Sure.
Alliance. But
Anytime.
one question about Bryce Zabel. I think he would be a great founding member. Have you thought about him?
Bryce Zabel is absolutely welcome to be a founding member of this organization, as many are. Various people will approach. We're open to that. But again, they have. They got to come. We're not out recruiting so much as we're just letting things organically happen. Pretty much the way we're going to gather founding members is.
I might tweet him.
Through
I might send him a tweet.
Yeah, through referrals by other founding members. It's not like an application you're applying to college. In other words, new members will come in as referrals from other founding members and board members. This is a way to keep it, I think, nice and balanced. And obviously, anybody who is respected in this field, we'd love to have. We'll see, but it's evolving, and I think a lot of people need to see how it's going to go before they're prepared to, I think, approach us, and that's perfectly fine. But I think we're off to a good start. And once we start raising money, we'll start holding events and things like that, and do what we can. So check out the HollywoodDisclosureAlliance.org, and also check out the Environmental Media Association if you want to see the ultimate example of what we're trying to do at the highest level. I mean, we will probably never reach that level, but it's an impressive organization started with very much the same concept and mission that we have.
That's the model. All right, I got a couple of things, or three things I want to finish with. I want to thank Rob also for being here, which leads to one of the other things. Next Wednesday, we'll be doing another episode. We'll be having Mario Woods come on, and so Rob's going to help me co-host that one as well. And then one thing I forgot to mention, that last clip that I played was by Unidentified Anomalous Podcast, and that's Tom Thompson and Digby Furno. I think I pronounced his last name correct, and so I just want to promote that as well. Once again, Steve and Rob, I want to thank you for being here. What a blessed show. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.